Five guys, just so you know.
Okay. So it'll be a process that pulls people in, and that's what it is. Because the more you use the trivia method and walk and logos, the more concrete it gets. So just telling people truth really isn't doing too much shit. So
Oh, I should put my glasses on. I can't see a freaking thing. They're over here. Sweet.
all right. So what do you guys think that would be the most effective as the purpose for having these roundtable discussions? Like, what do you see as the audience benefiting and being able to take from seeing it in action?
Well, in my own personal experience, for the last, I would say, at least 7 years in my own personal life, I've been battling trying to come up with the most efficient way to communicate with my in group and even with people that I've never met and getting into debates, practicing the trivium and what the space that I'm in now is trying to come up with a way where you can comfortably just speak the truth to people without without worrying about sugarcoating it. I would say because for the longest time, people would tell me, "Oh, well, you can tell people the truth, and but you come off as really." Um,
Arrogant.
yeah, you come off, they switch it around on you. It took me forever to figure out that
Yeah.
all that is a diversion tactic. For the longest time, I was like, okay, I'd have to go sit and think about it for a while. I'd get into a discussion with somebody, tell them, just speak the truth, even if my voice was shaking, because I knew it would cause a controversy, it would cause a fight or whatever, but I would still do it. And, I'd go sit and think about it. And, the excuse I always got was, your delivery is wrong.
Yeah, your
You're,
rhetoric.
yeah, you're not catering to my uh,
Emotions.
emotions, you know. It took me a while to figure out. No, you're just playing the victim because your defense mechanisms are up, and you don't want to hear the truth because And so they'd make me the bad guy, and you guys already know all of this, but
Mm.
what I'm interested in is figuring out the most efficient way. So what I've been doing is I've been specifically focusing on, you probably heard me mention the rational scientific method, which is very similar to the trivium. But what you do first is you define your key terms. Because so many times I've ever gotten to a discussion with somebody where I'm trying to explain the truth to them.
Yeah.
Um, they they focus a lot on a definition that they
An
have in their own
equivocation
head.
fallacy, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
Well,
and
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 that
so
that's actually part of the trivium is defining your terms.
yeah, exactly. Yeah,
Well,
well, the rational scientific method and the trivium are so close, but yeah. So define the key terms, know exactly what we're talking about before we start arguing. Make sure we're on the same page and we agree on what we're arguing for or against, and then yeah, be able to tell the truth without letting somebody just go, oh well, you're just attacking me, and it's like,
here,
well,
here's the one thing, Caleb, if you don't mind me jumping in, I don't to try to find the most efficient and effective way of telling the truth and clarity of words. However, truth can only be absorbed if they're seeking it. So that's
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 true.
this is no matter how gentle and how loving and how truthful we are. Um, the unfortunate part is most people, because of the tribal and collective thought that we get trapped in and presented by our masters, is that it's almost safer for them to stay in their collective and reject the truth
Yeah.
than
Well, I
to. So
I
this
agree.
this is one of the biggest battles we do, is that fear of losing that support, illusion, the support of that identity of that group
No,
collective.
I agree completely, but I also believe part of the whole being an alpha thing is that you realize it's not about teaching other people. It's more about it's about
Living in truth.
motivating people by living in truth.
and
Yes.
and your own example of meekness. It's like Jesus is the alpha and the omega. He's calm, cool, collected, and he takes the bullshit of the
Yeah.
omega. You know, And so, and of course, people have spun that to the beginning and the end. I think that's really the alpha male personality, as well as somebody who can take the crap and still, be humble and meek, and that's something that, usually when somebody comes at me, I just knock them out, and it's like,
Yeah.
it's like some troll last night who's probably Kurt Doolittle, who's a contractor for the CIA. As soon as I posted the thread on Facebook, this person with a fake account pretending to be a woman jumps in there and posts this whole thing about stoicism. I mean, it sounded exactly like Kurt Doolittle, right?
Right.
And they weren't a member. You couldn't friend them or anything. That all of the buttons were missing on their channel. And I just go in there and I immediately start to just like, it's like the first time Kurt ever got into it with me, I just knocked him the hell out. And so I immediately go in there with that same thing, but it's like, all right, I need to learn to back off. It's like when you go through and you read Proverbs and it's like, all right, if you start acting like that, or Titus as well, you start acting like that and you're the fool, because it's talking about you,
Right.
Oh yeah.
Well, it's like that. That
Stephen,
Proverbs
by the
saying-
way, Stephen is over there. We have like 24, 25 people watching, by the way, but we're here with Mark, Caleb, and Stephen, and we're just doing a little test run here on a new Logos Roundtable show we've been talking about doing for like 6 or 8 months. Mark and I have especially. And so this is just kind of a little kickoff. Good morning, everyone in the chat there. Hi to Australia and everywhere else. Good to have you guys with us, or folks. So Steve hasn't said a word in like 10 minutes here.
Well, yeah, I guess what we're talking about right now is what we'd like to see out of the roundtable. And one of the things that I'd like to see out of it is, as you guys are more than aware enough of, there's not enough good role models out there doing good things, getting publicity for it. More people out there could probably tell you about the fictional characters on their movies than they could about the real events that are taking place in the world. And so I see this as a good catalyst for being able to inspire other people to maybe focus a little bit more on what's actually happening in the world and a little bit less on what's being conjured up by whatever authors are putting out the shows or whatever.
Steve,
that's the big battle, right? That's the battle.
Can you put yourself a little more centered there in the camera?
Yeah, here.
There you go.
Caleb, did you mute yourself?
Yeah, I just muted myself because I was playing the YouTube so I could read the chat and I didn't want it to blow up. So.
Oh yeah, I always forget to mute the stupid YouTube thing like every single time. It's like the running joke now because I forget to mute it so much.
But I think that what Stephen just said about the real versus the artificial really gets to the crux of it. When we talk about natural law or the man-made law or manufactured from man or what is just is.
Logos.
Yeah.
The antithesis.
Yeah. I mean, so many people escape to the artificial and the adaptation, manufactured reality. So how do we give, though, live reality examples when we're just still speaking? It's still an exchange of words and symbols and they don't see if it is. So that's going to be tough as giving the living examples other than us just speaking it and being truthful with our struggles and our successes,
Mm-hmm.
And thanks to the Dashing Rogue for just sending us $2 for starting out. He asks, what is the purpose of the roundtable style show? So that's what we're getting into right now is we're trying to lay out the ideas of how we want to run it. We're going to have a rotating moderator each week, I think, and just have a question or questions each show to, of hot topic issues, getting to truth, it may be more alpha male centered and helping betas be alphas, helping men be in truth, but not necessarily. We'll probably have a lot of women guests as well. We haven't really ironed everything out yet. It's just, this is sort of preliminary. We made it live this morning so that people could hear the conversation and the direction that we're trying to go with this. And so we're trying to have steady people that'll be in it each week, as well as maybe some people who will rotate in and out each week, so that we can have different topics or expertise. We plan on making it so that the listening audience can join into the conversation at times. Maybe we'll have a call-in number, or maybe, people that post really great points in the chat can join up in a future episode or something like that, and join in the conversation or whatnot. So that's sort of a rundown. It's going to be logos focused, so that we're teaching people how to get to and deal with the truth. For those who, if your screen is large enough, you should be able to see everybody's name in the little window there. We're here with Mark Warhol, Caleb Thomas, Stephen Sorensen, and of course myself, Jan Irvin. And I've been doing this for 10 years now. Mark has been on a couple of shows. Caleb's been on a couple of shows. This is Stephen's first time. Anyway, we're just, we thought we would make it public on what the goal of this is, and just try to help people gain clarity and understanding of the social issues, the social degradation that's going on right now, how to speak in truth and not offend people, the infamous reality turds, etc. So,
And also I would add is to really make this an active program where you get stuff and we talk about things that you actually implement, versus it just remaining in the spirit or the soul. And here, how do you actually implement it? And then as you do that, the feedback that you'll get, how do you deal with that? Because it's a constant process of refinement. None of us have the answers. We just have eliminated problems and contradictions, so we have less. But we still are going to continue seeing that. And I think a lot of the viewers and listeners will see that process and how we go through that when you do face contradictions and challenges.
And hey, what did we learn last week to this week, and how did we implement whatever we learned or whatnot, so that hopefully it's a more hands-on type show rather than just the bare bones research, just discussion topics more than hard research like I've been doing for a decade.
Well, and I'd also like to just throw it out there that, I can't speak for everybody, but for my own personal agenda, I value the truth more than I value anything else. So what I would appreciate is people call me out on my bullshit if they if they catch me on it. I'm 100% in for criticism, even if it's not what I want to hear.
Well, with the caveat that they've actually pulled up any facts and they're just not feeding you their opinion. It's like we did the show last night and somebody posts up, well, Terrence McKenna shouldn't be involved in this because he taught people how to grow mushrooms, and so therefore he wasn't a part of the CIA's operation, so he shouldn't be included. And it's like, never mind, I've exposed the McKenna brothers for like 5-6 years now and whatnot, but how do we, get people to start questioning what they, think, mushrooms are older than the CIA, so therefore, the CIA couldn't use them for mind control. That's one of the most common and utterly ridiculous arguments that I get. One of them is that, oh, do you think the CIA invented mushrooms? And it's just like, wow, never mind that all of the ancient historical reports show that the Aztecs used them for a death cult and to prepare their human sacrifices. They would get them high on mushrooms so that they would get less resistance when they slaughtered them, Mm-hmm. So, and it's like you look at the slaughter of the masses and they're all, duh, and I was guilty, I used to do that stuff and write books on it and everything else. And, I woke up in the middle one day and realized that everybody I was writing and interviewing were CIA scumbags. So I had to, I had to distance myself from it. And I came out, years ago against all of my own previous works. So, and it's also like, living in truth or logos. You know, it's about how do you own up when you're wrong about something, you know, like, you know, Caleb was just saying.
Yeah, exactly. And it's a humbling experience, but you know, if you really do value growth and truth over your own, you know, your own other personal agendas, um, you know, we're gonna use the trivium. We're not gonna let people just make false claims and argue, you know, with logical fallacies. We're gonna have to you know, stick to the program. And that's what's so cool about having this amount of people or this platform to be able to call each other out and to be able to work out contradictions and you know, dig deeper, etc.
I'm going to quick jump in and mention Proverbs, Jan, since you've been reading through that lately. The thing that you said earlier, Caleb, about being called out on your bullshit or whatever, that's straight out of Proverbs. I'm pretty sure there's a quote in there, something about wise man appreciates it when someone calls him out, foolish man scorns him or whatever. I was just Googling it, trying to find the Bible verse, but I can't. But
well, like that, you know, the man returns to his folly, like the dog returns to his vomit. I love that proverb. It's like, dude, you just threw that up. Why are you going back and licking it back up, man? Let it lie.
Yeah.
But yeah, definitely being open to the criticism is a positive thing there.
Well, I would say I worship truth. So it gets, you know, if everybody's religion was seeking truth, we'd all end up at the same place. And the conversations, man, it would be about how do you get closer to it. But so that's me. I'm in the same boat as Caleb, that my ultimate goal is to find truth. And I often use a synonym for truth as God. Right. So,
well, it is.
It is. And remember the Khazari, we were reading about these Jewish, I would just say religious leaders that were going to this emperor, and they were all presenting the religious technique to use to control the masses. And one of the techniques, this guy who was from the Jewish tradition was talking about deifying concepts. So when you deify it onto a person, the person who then gets to communicate with that person or has information becomes powerful. So this is how you could weaponize truths.
Yeah,
weaponize
deification.
God. Yes,
Looked into that for a bit.
So, Dashing Rogue asks, Jan, have you heard of Vox Day and his social sexual hierarchy, alpha, beta, gamma, sigma, omega males? It might be good reading. And then Alien asks if Jordan B. Peterson, who took over Timothy Leary's position at Harvard, is CIA. If you got to ask that, you already know the answer, Alien.
Yeah,
but
the grammar.
He's got a one eye there. I wonder if that's an agenda there. I always question people who use a one eye in their avatar. They're part of the gig. And, of course, he's got nothing in his channel or anything, so...
I'm actually familiar with Vox Day. He's kind of one of the talking heads of, I guess you could consider him alt-right. If he doesn't consider himself alt-right, he definitely gets interviewed by most of the proponents in the alt-right. But I am familiar with his work on some of his work in his blog as far as what he talks about. I'm actually asking this person seriously, is all of that serious? I was under the impression that some of it was satire, some of the stuff he talks about with hierarchy. But anyways, we can move on with that. And then as far as Jordan Peterson goes, you know, I think he's just another one of those he's popular. Yeah, he's limited hangout. He's popular for a reason. I mean, obviously, if you've gotten this far in the show and you're not completely new, I think
what's the similarity between Leary and Jordan Peterson? They both get fired and then are promoted globally as the figureheads of their movements, right?
As rebels.
Right, as rebels, right.
Can't have a good youthful rebellion without it.
And, you know, it's like the CIA pretends with... what's his name? I've met that guy a few times. The guy that ran the Harvard Crimson, and he writes a bogus hit piece on Leary that gets Leary and Ramdas, Dick Alpert fired from Harvard, quote and air quotes fired from Harvard. And then they immediately become the poster children for the psychedelic revolution because the CIA Harvard was trying to suppress their spiritual message of mind control with suggestogens, you know?
Hey guys, you mind if I just, part of this morning, I got to take off in 22 minutes as
No
I got
worries.
to pick up a bunch of microscopes from a college.
My
that they
clock says
donated.
28 minutes.
Hey, well, I was thinking about let's do a test run, and I'll be moderator, and then let you guys go on this topic, and I'll jump in too. But let's just pick one, like you just said. We were talking about the alpha, and Jordan Peterson, and some of these topics. What about let's just say let's get into a topic. What is an alpha and what is a beta? Are you always an alpha? Do you switch from alpha to beta at times depending on situations? So let's hit that, and then what we'll do as a practice is I'll just moderate it, and then if we find contradictions or different things, let's play with that for a little bit. Yes, because otherwise we're just gonna keep wandering and
Sure. Yeah. What we want to eventually do is figure out how to put some sort of on-screen clock here so that we can all see it, so that whoever has the floor for so much time, when the clock runs out, it automatically goes to the next person.
Yes.
Cool. Who wants to try to tackle?
And I'm gonna, as the moderator of this first topic, after the person makes a statement, the others can then first ask questions for clarity. Just so gets to that term. So in case Caleb used a term that we interpret differently or something, we could ask, what did you mean by this word? So we could get clarity on it, and then someone else could pose an opposition point. So it's kind of like that, the talking stick method. We good with that?
Cool. Yeah, I'll go first if everyone's cool with that. Okay, so all right, so alpha. Alpha does not necessarily mean that you are a bully. A lot of people get it in their head, like especially if you've studied like the animal kingdom, they'll associate fighting and bullying and stuff like that. If you really look into, say, apes or some of the primates, it's a good example there. Wolves, so there are plenty of examples, but the alpha is a leader. He's responsible for cohesion of the group, of the in-group, and protection. He's a watchdog. He's and most of the time in the group there's only one alpha, but this is an example in nature. However, the examples that we have in nature, the alpha is always also the most compassionate. He's usually as compassionate or more compassionate than the women in the group, because he has to maintain a good positive relationship with most people in the group. He's not just walking around bullying everybody. So it's not just what the stereotypical alpha male that some people are thinking about, as far as walking around being over assertive, and however, there's a certain point where the alpha needs to step up and use his will to the agenda is always the group, correct, but it's the most efficient, best way of doing things, and he's the most capable of doing it. So if every group needs a leader, if somebody's going to step up and do it, he's going to need to be challenged, because if there's somebody else that can do the job better,
and should be challenged,
and he should be challenged constantly. That's the whole idea of it, is the challenge makes you rise to the occasion. So you're constantly challenging yourself. You're constantly working out contradictions, working out problems, and getting better and better. And it's all about growth. And I would say, for people who are stereotypically saying there's no such thing as an alpha, or confused about the idea, just start there, and then we can work that into.
Yeah,
John and Steven.
Oh, me or Steven?
Either one of you.
All right, so I just want to answer to this really quick. This someone Burnload says, "Love Jan, but the certainty with which he speaks makes him wrong. What? So, never mind the research that you do and using the trivium and removing contradictions and getting down to the truth, which is the point of it. It's the fact that you speak with certainty automatically makes you wrong. I can't think of what fallacy that is off the top of my head, but that's a lie.
Gotta be like
People can change and reshape their opinions, but one would think they wouldn't be so pompous afterwards. And we started off how, Caleb, you mentioned this exact attitude when you speak in truth. If somebody's done the research and they know all of the research, you've done all of the grammar, you've done the logic on things, then there's always somebody, when you try to speak the facts, somebody who hasn't studied it at all is almost always going to make a comment like Burns lives.
I'm gonna practice my moderator thing and get
all right.
us.
No problem.
Yeah, because that is a beta. This was a great on topic. That was a very beta comment, and we could get to that later. But for Caleb's comment about it's not stereotypical strongest and dominant. It's the person who leads through example and looks of the groups first. Any disagreements or clarity questions needed on that from you, Stephen, or you, Jan?
So, well, what I wanted to go in is, the idea of the alpha, and you had asked, is the alpha always an alpha? So, and we've all been learning this on the fly because we weren't taught these things as men. Pretty much this stuff was lost in the 60s and 70s, and people aren't taught meekness anymore. Christianity has been pushed aside where honesty, meekness, humbleness, honor at all were pushed away. Meekness is not weakness. And the other day I was looking in the Oxford OED, and they had some pretty...
Invert it.
Yeah, they invert the definition, and some of them, not all of them. Let me see if I can find it.
Well, Mark and I were even just talking about the definition of meek last night and how from the original meaning it's
I'm supposed to be holding the... So, hold on. Sorry, I'll let you go here in just a second. But to make the meek in spirit, to humble, and then to bring... See, some of the false definitions are to humiliate, to abase oneself. But what meekness is, when you realize it, is somebody who lives in truth. They're humble. They're not going to... they're not controlled by their emotions, which is one thing that a beta uses all the time, is their emotions to do their thinking. And then, so let's say if we lose and fall out of our meekness and our humbleness, and we get angry and lose our temper and blow up, we're actually going into beta mode, and so someone will claim, well, you're so smart and you always think so critically, so therefore if you're angry, you're doing it calculated. No, that's actually, an alpha can fall into a beta stage. It doesn't mean we don't come back to alpha when we're not like that, but it's like or Jesse Lee Peterson said recently that a man who acts with anger is a woman, because women are more emotionally based and men aren't supposed to be.
Well, and let me, just for clarifying on that, are you saying that when the emotional aspect of man gets triggered, is that when men fall out of logos?
No, it's when they react to that emotion rather and allow it to control them. It's like, okay, so the emotion comes in, and then rather than staying centered, staying zen, whatever you want to call it, you allow it to knock you off center. That's when you become the beta.
Okay, so it's the manifestation of the emotion. So if you're acting and the emotion manifests, then you fall out of logos?
It's the manifestation of the emotion. Yes, it's the outward manifestation of the emotion.
So the cue would be, as soon as you start feeling emotional and you're feeling like, oh my God, I want to slap that bitch.
I'll be right back.
Okay, as a guy, I mean, not as a girl. Or I can't believe they said that. And then you start to speak with that anger or that. Now I think as soon as that occurs, you're in trouble in logos.
So, what we're trying to do in this, and unfortunately, Steve just had to step out, so he can't take over his chance, and this person is still going on in here. But so speaking in truth and having confidence in your research, having actually researched stuff, rather than just attacking ideas and name calling. You're pompous. You're this because you've actually researched. It's like, people who haven't researched a subject. See, when we've gone through all the grammar, we're certain in our facts. We've checked all the facts. That's what the trivium is for, is you checking all of the grammar, removing all of the contradictions from the research, and having that epiphany moment where you can say, aha, there's no contradictions left. I've arrived at truth. And then when you know the truth, you can stand behind the truth and not be easily kicked out of that. And so, it allows you to stay centered in the facts and information, regardless of people who want to attack or whatever, or who are, entirely misinformed. They feel that because you're confident in the information, that makes you automatically wrong. But that's, as you said, that's a very beta position.
Let me go this then. If you have the truth, we'll go to, who's it, Stephen or Caleb?
Stephen.
If you have the truth, and is there an alpha way of disseminating truth or acting out on that truth? Is there an alpha way? Because, we often bring in meekness. So
right.
just
and we have the truth, it's not to say we couldn't improve our rhetoric, right?
Well, I think that I think the truth is part of living in Logos is understanding that you're dealing with emotional people. And my wife always says there's more emotional people than people like us who will jump to the logic, So knowing that, if we're going to live in Logos, shouldn't we speak logically with the sensitivity of that emotional reception that's going to happen? I mean, I think an alpha would do that.
I'm going to quick interject to,
you got the floor.
I've never heard anyone say that you're wrong because of how confident you're talking.
That is a new argument. That's the most ignorant argument I've heard in a long time. Yeah.
I was thinking about it. It's like you could call it like an Adio to Don Quixote or something. Like
it's a
you're just confident. These aren't giants to slay.
It's a form of ad hominem attack. It's like it's probably a circumstantial ad hominem attack. Like, you are a Christian, so therefore you're wrong. You're confident, therefore you're wrong. I'm not going to deal with the facts and information and citations that you provide. You're wrong because you're confident. I mean, it's just...
Well, how would an alpha, though, correct their family? How would an alpha correct their tribe? I mean, for me, the way I do it within my family and children, it takes tons of consciousness. For one child, if I say Dad's real disappointed in you, she's devastated. Mm-hmm. The other one, I've got to make actual physical consequences and take things away. So even though they're both, I'm holding the standards and the truth the same, being the alpha and showing meekness, if I did the same harshness I did with Mickey, Jan, as I did with Kiana, that would not be showing meekness. So it ain't no easy game being an alpha of a group. So I get being truthful and people being able to swallow it. And sometimes I don't really care. I just want to throw it out there into a digital land and people could absorb it as they wish. And I know that person's going to be hurt. But when you're dealing with your own tribe and your family, people that you forced to be with, if you do that tactic, that is kind of a beta bully move. That gets into the alpha definition Caleb was talking about earlier.
Well, let's go on with that, helping the family out. And how do you tell someone that they're wrong and whatnot? Caleb's talking earlier about definitions and, we shouldn't be meek because meek means submissive and easily imposed upon. And that's the most recent definition. And I wanted to segue into this just to help people kind of understand. Jan, I've looked into this ever since you mentioned the nice thing, how they've inverted nice from being stupid and foolish into being, oh yeah, man, that's great. Like, you're doing great.
Well, you should be kind or kindly and, more than nice, and I have found other definitions that don't jive with that one that I found on nice. And, it seems, I'd have to dig far back through dictionaries and see what the root of the word is, but. So
we'll wrap this back to meek, which apparently comes, according to Google on dictionary.com, comes from an Old Norse word meaning soft or gentle. And then through Middle English, it took on the definition of courteous or indulgent. And now it means quiet, easily imposed upon, and submissive, which Mark and I were talking about yesterday. It struck me as sort of and even on the timeline here, the use of the word drops, and it strikes me sort of as water, where water is soft and gentle but strong. And it doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to submit to a hard force such as a rock, where it can wear down a rock or cut through a rock even. It was interesting though, because courteous and indulgent even has much different implications than easily imposed upon and submissive.
See,
You know
this person who is in there all upset about me being confident, now they're in their name calling. I mean, when they start name calling, that's an automatic fail of their argument. They've automatically lost. So if you're, you know, he's saying
beta move.
I'm a pussy, I'm a prickly cunt, and all of this stuff. That's an automatic epic fail there.
And I would encourage, I think it's great bringing that up occasionally, but I would encourage as demonstrating alpha behavior is just, I mean, that's such a beta move. And like my students in my class, when I have 35 students, that one kid who does the name calling gets attention from the teacher, and everybody stops and everybody gives attention, kind of like what we just did with that beta child who in the classroom's going, neener, neener, yan. And so I would encourage us, we could bring it out occasionally just to, you know, to show how the childishness of it. But for the most part, I think it would be good as we move forward to ignore some of that, unless it's a really good example to teach a fallacy. You know?
Right. Well, which is what we're using Burns loads, who's probably just a troll. But I mean, yeah, it's very childish behavior. So how do you encourage someone to look at the citations and facts that we're presenting rather than attacking us for being confident because we've researched and they have not? You know, so... You know, it's getting people to begin to use critical thinking. Most people don't know any critical thinking, but they think that they're good critical thinkers. They've never studied critical thinking.
And here's the thing that I think would be great for us to discuss. There's knowing and thinking, and there's doing. So there's some assholes out there that know a whole shitload. They're stuck in their closet researching. I could give a shit because you're making no impact on life. So
no social skills.
Exactly. So how do you take truth? How do you take the trivium method and apply it to whether you're single, in a family, at work? You know, we were talking martial arts, Stephen. Alpha in the martial arts, people think, oh, it's the best fighter. But I don't know if you've ever been in martial arts. I know Stephen has. But the best fighter is often not the alpha. The alpha is the one that looks over everybody and communicates the most. He might tap that guy who's the ass kicker to handle somebody. And everybody knows that they're the alpha as far as physically and fighting, but as the alpha might be someone who's 3 stages less than him in power and fighting technique, just because of the way they nurture to the community. So, you know, so it is required us to be nurturing. And in the sense, if someone doesn't have the grammar, and we could throw the grammar out there, but it's really about how does that grammar make my life better? Because if I can't convince you that what I'm sharing with you and the truth that we have will make your life better, then it's just this whole mental thing. And that's, we want to kind of get away with this roundtable, to really get people to act. And that's why having them interact and come in and comment, especially when we connected with Facebook on the next week's topic, seeing what people are doing, we could share our successes and failures, finding contradictions, all that kind of stuff. So alpha male in development, sometimes we probably are alphas in some aspects, and in some aspects we're beta.
Stephen, sorry, just really quick. Stephen, people are asking if you have a YouTube channel. I'm guessing you don't?
Not yet.
Sorry,
no.
Go ahead, Caleb.
I was going to just throw it in there. You know, when people are, you know, looking for what signs whether or not somebody is, you know, an alpha, somebody who acts victimized, somebody who plays the victim and tries to get resources or appeals to emotion, that's usually a big red flag that you're not. And somebody who's triggered, like if you get triggered and you get angry very easily, that's a sign that you're not very good at managing your emotions. You let your emotions lead as opposed to letting you know, the truth, the trivium, and the process of critical thinking lead. So, and the other thing I wanted to mention was the New Age movement. I know this because I looked into it quite a bit, and I was even sucked into parts of it for a little while in my past. And I've learned from my mistakes, and I'll say that a lot of the bullshit that goes around in the New Age is that a man can be both feminine and masculine, and be very in touch with his emotions and do all these female aspects, and that the goal is to be balanced in your head mentally, female and masculine. They go on and on about this, but in reality, I would say that it's more of a balance to have a female with a strong male and a strong female.
Yes.
And the female can keep you in balance, as far as to make sure that she brings in some of the emotional aspect to it. And it isn't about an alpha completely getting rid of all emotion and being just 100% critical thinking. You are just critical thinking first, and you are emotional second, and you do not let your emotions drive your actions. You let your emotions keep you in check from time to time to make sure you're not going against your goal, and acting as an antithesis to your goal.
Just so I'm gonna have to take off, but just to add what Caleb says, that when logic is the only thing that is existing in the spirit and it's being expressed, purely facts, it's negating the truth that people have emotion, and as you say things, they're going to receive it emotionally. So I think what Caleb says is that, yeah, you as a male, you need to be led by that logic and that right brain, the left brain, and not have emotion trumpet. But I think what happens is when we shut off the emotional sympathy and empathy factor, we miss that maybe we said something that triggered someone and they've shut off and we're still going. And now it looks like we're a tyrant. And see, this is where feminine energy and emotions, like my wife is constantly teaching me. I mean, going from a male who had to shut off emotion to try to get and read and touch has been a process, especially with being kids and marriage. And I'll tell you what, it wouldn't have happened if I wasn't in marriage and took that vow seriously, because it's not an easy process for those men who've gone through that process of shutting off emotion because they didn't want to be that little kid crying when someone hurt their feelings. Exactly. So, that the world kind of creates that and programs that, and that turns us into what we think the illusion of alpha is, and we become tyrants, and it sets it up perfect for the mainstream media to attack masculinity, right? So masculinity is like what Stephen says, be like water. We could change forms. I could cut through steel, so don't think that my comfort in my nurture of the water coming down gently as a liquid form is the only form I could be in as an alpha.
Exactly. And alpha always admits when he's wrong as well. So that's just such a huge thing too. Like if you get caught, assuming something, and you're preaching the trivium and you're preaching truth, if you get caught, the smartest thing to do is to own up and say, because a lot of people have their guard up against admitting they're wrong, because so many people make these fallacies in their own mind about if somebody's wrong once or twice, then that makes them wrong in the future, which is obviously a logical fallacy, because
poisoning the well.
The more you're wrong about something, the more the chances of being right get narrowed down. So that's the whole purpose, is to align our emotions with the truth, and to align our misfortunes, our every little aspect of our consciousness. If we're trying to grow, we're going to align it with the truth instead of denying it. We don't.
So Jan and Stephen, would you agree that humility is a requirement for an alpha? That they have.
Absolutely. Well, what we should do is, maybe the first official show that we do should be just focused on what is meekness.
I think that's a good one. Let's throw it out to the audience too on social media and get some good references and see what the consciousness collectively is on that.
Well, we could even go through some of the fruits of the spirit straight out of the Bible, because aren't those what are supposed to be bared from Christians?
Yeah, well, yeah, if you can live up to that, that's the pinnacle of what you're supposed to attempt as an alpha. But, Jesus didn't go around like, people will say turn the other cheek, but that was more, it wasn't about him being submissive. I mean, clearly he said, sell your cloak and buy a sword. He went through the temple kicking over the tables and exposing everybody and, saying, look, you're lying, you're lying, you're lying. And by the time he was done, he only had a small little round table of friends,
Yeah. Well, how more badass can you be than going into the temple of snakes and Satan worshipers, the Pharisees and Sadducees, and standing and challenging them? I mean, that's not meekness in any way. And the fact that he did it in a manner where he didn't get killed immediately, right, is pretty badass.
Well, but living in truth all the time probably will get you killed,
Well, it will, especially at the level of which Jesus Christ, the story of Jesus, you take it that far. Oh yeah.
Something's going to kill us all, and you can either be living in truth or not when that happens.
Well said.
Yeah. Hey, I'll tell you what, before I leave, I'll leave you with this one. The Romans used to like getting homosexuals to fight in soldiers and wars and people without kids. In fact, they banned marriage, right? I say getting married and having children makes me a better warrior, but I'll only fight for a just war. You see, you could get the single ones that don't have kids and they don't want to fight an unjust war because they're like, I need to be there for my kids. You just got to give them some, females to abuse or give them the riches to steal. And they're like, yeah. But if anybody knows and has kids, if you want a real warrior, you have someone fighting to defend those kids' lives from being, and the parent, no one will fight harder. So what we're talking about, when you have kids and you are responsible now for a group, mandated wise in a sense, your alpha-ness gets called upon. And you either got to rise to it or you're going to suck like half the other people out there blowing. So I challenge everybody who's like, I'm trying to find what an alpha is. Have some balls and create some life, man. Get out there and build your own tribe. That's the only one that you, under natural law, have the right to be called father and king over. And then you can see whether you're worthy to do so before you start expanding out to the rest of the world, wanting to control them. But gentlemen, I love it. Let's keep going. You guys keep going. I got to go pick up some microscopes.
All right, Mark, have a good one. We'll see you soon, man.
See you later, Mark.
Bye.
See you later, Mark.
So, interesting. Yeah, it's pretty interesting. So we got about 70 people viewing right now, by the way, and lots of good comments. The one person who was apparently a troll I banned. They were just going on and on, name-calling and acting emotionally, etc. So, it's... it's really interesting. How meek can you say, research the facts before you say, because somebody is confident they're wrong, or, just these sorts of things. This is why we've put out the trivium. Sure, maybe I could work on rhetoric more, okay, and being more humble in my speech and approach. We can all use that. But, typically, if I'll put out, weeks worth of research and write an article or do a show on it or show series, whatever. And then typically the people who have not researched or read it and not checked the citations are the first to attack me and say that I'm wrong about the research that they have not read. So how do you deal with such a level of ignorance? And that's what ignorance comes from. It's to ignore. And so when people ignore the citations, they ignore the research, they attack the ideas from this emotional beta male state, like this burn loads person in the chat earlier. How do we, deal with people like this in a more humble, meek manner so that, we can pull them through? And, a lot of times, like, my wife is surprised that I even interact with the trolls or with the haters and whatnot, because, here's the thing, as I've figured out over the years, is like typically within 20 to 30 exchanges, if somebody is really a troll, they'll show their hand, or they only sit there and name call. They never start to question or admit they're wrong. But somebody who's a willful dupe, if you persist and provide facts and citations, a lot of times they'll begin to question what they believed, and then they'll admit that they were wrong, and then you win them over. So, that's usually my my reasoning for dealing with trolls and haters at all. These days I kind of get to the point where I just ban them outright. I don't want to spend the time on them, but I also feel like I'm doing a disservice to some people in a way, because if they are willful dupes, then we lose somebody that we could have won over just by blocking them or whatever, because they're, being so hateful and ignorant or whatever, because, they want to react emotionally because Terrence McKenna was their hero and they were high on mushrooms. I mean, we've all done mushrooms. I wrote books on mushrooms, and I had to come out and humble myself and admit that my previous work was wrong. And why was it wrong? Well, I was working with all of these CIA-tied professors, and I never got the memo that they were all, in on the gig. All they did was they cited each other, and then I started getting down into the primaries and checking everybody's work, and I was like, wait a second, the whole field of ethnobotany and ethnomycology was wrong. They were all lying. So, then I had to come out and over a series of articles admitting this stuff and humbling myself and saying, all of that work was wrong, and here's why. And then I did the Spies in Academic Clothing article, which laid out exactly how these intelligence cells operate and how they, create that, that cycle that's also controlled through peer review to keep any outside dissenting opinions from getting in and exposing the facts. So, this is how they control the narrative. So how do we get people, to begin to think, and a lot of, like I said earlier, a lot of people who have no critical thinking, who've never studied even logic, much less the trivium, most of those people, per the Dunning-Kruger effect, think that they have critical thinking. And the Dunning-Kruger effect, for those who aren't familiar, is those who are the most incompetent usually think they're the most competent on a subject. Like, this burn loads would be the perfect example. They're the least competent on a subject, but they feel like they're the most competent. And because you're confident, they're going to attack that. Go ahead, Stephen.
I'll just quick clarify that the Dunning-Kruger effect is specifically for when somebody who is not informed on a subject believes that they are more informed than they are.
Correct.
Not that people that don't have the information mostly think that they know more than they do, but it's specifically to describe somebody that is not informed who believes that they are more informed than they really are, or on the opposite end of the scale, somebody that is an expert on something that undershoots how much they think they actually know about it. So yeah.
Go ahead. I was just pulling it up here so that people can see it. Are the stupid too, the Dunning-Kruger effect, are the stupid too stupid to realize they're stupid?
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. Yeah, that's unfortunately probably the leading problem that I have in discussing topics with people. If you really learn the trivium and you start to pay attention to how people will just blindly assume they already know something, and then when you start asking them questions, you start revealing that they're basing their opinions on a very small amount of information, and they're arguing with somebody who probably has a lot more information on the subject. And instead of asking questions to try to figure out where you disagree and everything, they just completely write it off, and it's the Dunning-Kruger effect.
Right. Well, it's like and I hate to use a university professor because it's a bad analogy, but it's like, because most university professors are on the take. If not, I think, in my personal opinion, all tenured professors in the United States are on the CIA or some intelligence payroll. But it would be like a Harvard, just for an analogy, a Harvard professor arguing with a kindergartner over facts, and the kindergartner, it's just, that's the difference in the amount of knowledge on the topic that people have. It's like, well, I've read one book on the subject or whatever. Well, I've read, 26 or 31 feet of shelf space on the subject, and own every book on the topic, and I've read every book on the topic, and I've gone through all the research, and I've checked the primary citations. And so somebody who's heard a Terrence McKenna talk, or they've heard Joe Rogan or somebody talk about this stuff, and then well, I know the facts because I was high on drugs. They couldn't be suggestogens. How could the CIA invent mushrooms? I mean, it's one of the most idiotic arguments out there, which I answered in my article Entheogens, What's in a Name. But it's it's like the Thomas Pynchon quote: if you ask the wrong questions, you'll get the wrong answers. So how do you get people to start asking the right questions and questioning if they're stupid or not? And if they're stupid or ignorant, how can they overcome that and start being intelligent, right?
I think I have a little bit of insight in that. I've actually used that same argument that you just brought up, with somebody in a discussion or a debate on a topic many times. And, specifically when you were saying, the analogy of the Harvard professor versus a kindergartner, it's like, well, you bring up this argument, and what I get a lot of the time is their response is to say, well, just because you have read more or any of this, and apparently you could basically say that that's also a logical fallacy of appeal to authority, because you're like, okay, well, turns out, none of that really matters. What actually matters is what you're saying true, or is what I'm saying true. And the only way to get to the bottom of that is to have your argument sorted out
and to look at the facts. Well, and reading all of those books, I'm not appealing to any of their authority. For the whole field of ethnobotany, I overturned the whole field of ethnobotany when I published those articles, because I discovered that the whole field was full of crap, And
right.
it's
it is very useful as well, because you'll see people get, they'll turn it around on you and start to say, well, okay, so just because, you'll start to see their inferiority complex come out and say, oh, well, just because I haven't read as much. It's like, well, hold on a second, maybe take some responsibility for that. You do need to be educated on a subject if you're going to argue against it.
Right. Well, and then yes, and let me just finish this. And rather, and then they'll ignore the collation of all of the evidence in the argument that I've made as well. Okay, well, I didn't read all of those 26 shelf feet of books, but then they go even further and they don't even read the one article that brought it all down, so that they could take it all in one article rather than 26 feet of books. Go ahead, Steve.
All right. So this is going to take just a second to explain everything, but I spent a few years looking into American educational history, and in my studies on that, I got into the Bertrand Russell's books, and there's a chapter 2 on the impact of science on society, and it really does provide an interesting window into the past. And what I've done is I've gone through this chapter and I've pretty much broken it down. So I've got about a book's worth of info that I'm typing up about expansions and explanations for what happened here. Because this was written in the 50s. This was published in 52 based off of his speeches that he had been giving in colleges. I'm going to read just a small passage out of it. It's not even the most interesting passage, but it did catch my attention. And the quote reads, what went wrong formerly was that people had read in books that man is a rational animal and framed their arguments on this hypothesis. We now know that limelight and a brass band do more to persuade than can be done by the most elegant train of syllogisms. And that's the quote. But Jan, with your series on music, mind control, and psychobiology, you've probably done more than most have done to expose exactly how this is. How does limelight and a brass band do more to persuade people? Well, we look into it, and pretty much if you go back through Jan's music, mind control, and psychobiology, he lays it all out about when did the drugs come in? When did the music come in? Why are we using strobe lights? What is a concert? Like
FM radio even, right?
Well, yeah, I was trying to figure out what part to say on this book, because just before this quote, it says, talking about mass psychology. The importance has been enormously increased by modern methods of propaganda. Of these, the most influential is what is called education, quote unquote, in the book, education. So that was interesting. But the next sentence is religion plays a part, though a diminishing one. The press, the cinema, and the radio play an increasing part. And this is in the 50s. And so Bertrand has no idea what's to come here in the late 50s, 60s, and 70s, and what's about to happen to American culture, because these social sciences are in a very infantile state where they haven't really gotten the funding, or publicly have gotten funding to be able to do what they ended up doing with rock and roll music and punk and basically any other subgenre of music that falls out of the classical period. So yeah, all in all, it was interesting. Limelight and the brass band does more than logical reasoning.
That is for sure. I agree with that for sure.
Interesting.
The people that you interact with on a day-to-day basis definitely are more influenced by external media stimuli of some sort than they are of their own thoughts. That Jan, is for sure.
Are you familiar with this book?
No. What is it called again?
The Impact of Science on Society. Bertrand
Russell wrote it.
I'm sure you'd be interested in hearing this next part that comes up, because
yeah, go for it.
The next part's actually what got me into reading the whole book.
Go for it.
So he talks about Limelight and brass band. Music is more persuasive than reason. And then he continues on. It may be hoped in time that anybody will be able to persuade anybody of anything if he can catch the patient young and is provided by the state with money and equipment. So I got tons of questions on that. Why would it be hoped that anybody would be able to persuade anybody of anything if provided equipment from the state? What? So I got a lot of questions there and a lot of information that I've pulled based off of that. But this is the main body of it: is this subject will make great strides when it is taken up by scientists under a scientific dictatorship. So you can imagine what that looks like. Anaxagoras maintained that snow is black, but no one believed him. And that is the only mention in this book to Anaxagoras and snow being black. And I've looked into it, Jan, and it looks maybe like this philosopher maybe just created in the 11th, 12th century by some guy trying to promote his school, of being that we can't know anything for sure because it's
11th or 12th century with air quotes.
Yeah. Around then. Because like this dude is from some 6th century BC, I think, and then he's never heard of.
And then you delete the 1,000 years called the Dark Ages fraud, and then it's like, whoop.
Yeah, so he's from like 6th century. He's quoted by someone in the 1st century AD, and then there's 1,000 years that go by and no one's heard of him, and then this guy just discovers him as he's starting up his school. So that's another tangent.
It's probably Joseph Scaliger or something. It's like
someone else,
pseudo. It's
thing,
like Dennis Patavius or one of those guys was probably Plato. It's they all fake their own research and pen name their own stuff, and then use Latin names for themselves when they wrote to make it look like it was 1,000 years older than it really was.
So there's a lot of stuff to get into on this. I'm going to try and just get through this paragraph.
Sure.
The subject makes great strides when taken up under scientific dictatorship. Anaxagoras maintained that snow is black, but no one believed him. And this is where it gets interesting. The social psychologist of the future will have a number of classes of school children on whom they will try different methods of producing an unshakable conviction that snow is black. Various results will be soon arrived at. First, that the influence of home is obstructive. Yeah, because that's the first thing that you would arrive at if you think snow is black. Oh yeah, home is obstructive. Second, that not much can be done unless indoctrination begins before the age of 10. Because of course that would follow right after home being obstructive, since we're talking about snow being black. Third, that verses set to music and repeatedly intoned are very effective. When did they change the frequency and start promoting atonal music again?
Oh, geez, I can't remember.
It's around this time, I'll tell you. And then fourth, that the opinion that snow is white must be held to show a morbid taste for eccentricity, which is like, you're so confident, you don't even know.
Steven, stop being confident, man.
Yeah.
You act like you've read this stuff.
Yeah.
You act like you're like quoting him or something.
I know, as if I could even read or write.
Yeah.
But I anticipate it is for future scientists to make these maxims precise and discover exactly how much it costs per head to make children believe that snow is black, and how much less it would cost to make them believe it is dark gray. So
sounds like dark matter.
Here they are talking about how much is it going to cost per head to convince these kids that snow is indeed black, and how much less would it cost to teach them that it's just a dark gray.
Sure.
And how much less would it cost to let them just know and observe the fact that it's white, you know?
Exactly. So I'm actually going to just read the next paragraph too, because this is a question which I have still yet to find an answer to after a couple years now, a year or two of looking into this. It says, although this science will be diligently studied, it will be rigidly confined to the governing class. The populace will not be allowed to know how its convictions were generated. When the technique has been perfected, every government that has been in charge of education for a generation will be able to control its subjects securely without the need of armies or policemen. As yet, there is only one country which has succeeded in creating this politician's paradise. And so again, there's probably a lot of questions spawned out of that. But my question is, in the 1950s, what country could he possibly be talking about?
Ooh, I know. U.S.
Maybe.
Or Soviet Union or England.
But yeah, so that's up for discussion. If anybody knows.
All right, is there more for you to read? Because I want.
It.
Okay,
That's
so
it.
check this out.
Go ahead and hop in.
So this is a quote by Aldous Huxley that he wrote, Eric Blair, George Orwell. It says, but now psychoanalysis is being combined with hypnosis, and hypnosis has been made easy and indefinitely extensible through the use of barbiturates and psychedelics, which induce a hypnoid and suggestible state in which and even the most recalcitrant subjects. Within the next generation, I believe that the world's rulers will discover that infant conditioning and narco-hypnosis are more efficient as instruments of government than clubs and prisons, and that the lust for power can be just as completely satisfied by suggesting people into loving their servitude as by flogging and kicking them into obedience. And
do you have the source and year for that?
What's that?
Do you have the source and year for that quote?
Let me see. The source for that is let's see. It's Letters of Aldous Huxley, page 604, letter 572 to George Orwell, 21st of October, 1949. And of course, we do know that Aldous Huxley, which I have on screen here, Aldous Huxley and Bertrand Russell were friends. And of course, there's Aldous Huxley, the master of the CIA's MK Ultra program, and people, I've worked on exposing and mapping him out for years. But all of those connections in red are the most serious. Gregory Bateson, founder of the CIA, etc. But
for anyone listening, there's also another claim that Bertrand Russell was the president of the Fabian Socialist Society for a little bit, and I've yet to confirm that. But if anyone has any evidence for that, I'd be interested in seeing it.
Steven, just real quick, I was just reminded just before.
I have that he was a member, not a president.
All right.
When you were asking what country it could have been that he was referring to, I'm reminded of a quote that I'm looking for. I can't find it right off the bat. I don't remember if it was Rockefeller or if it was Rothschild. Sometimes I get them confused, but I remember one of them saying that he was discussing in one of his books that the perfect model that he would say would be the best model of education and pretty much everything you were just talking about is seen in China, in communist China, with the way that they've completely firewalled the internet and completely got everybody, kind of shelled off from the rest of the internet, and stuff like the stuff we talk about, and just very focused on what exactly the state itself wants. It just gets back to, obviously, communism is their end goal, isn't it?
Absolutely. I think we showed that pretty well in last night's episode too, with Holly, just exposing how all of this stuff was communism, and the Royal Society was who put the communism out for the most part. I mean, you can trace it back to Sir Thomas More, etc. But yeah.
So,
Well,
but
it's interesting that you mentioned China, because our education system is based off of the Prussian industrial system for education, to teach kids how to read and write just enough to be able to work the factories for the new machines.
which, if I'm not mistaken, that came out of the Romanov dynasty, didn't it? First,
I think actually, yeah, it might
who are
have.
also in,
It's
if
been
you
a few
read,
years since I looked into it.
I've been reading a ton of Fomenko, and Fomenko keeps alluding over and over again to the just how that's where all the history switched from being truth to being completely inverted, and where
with the Romanovs.
The Romanov dynasty was the one that came in and got rid of all of Russian history, Prussia, Russia, that sort of thing. So, anyways, that's huge to look into if you haven't yet. Is the Romanov dynasty when they came into power in Russia?
I should just point out that we've kind of gotten off the format of the Logos Roundtable thing.
Right. I actually still have a response to your question from earlier about what do you do when you talk to people? How do you get through to them? Get through all the logical fallacies and get straight to what's the best method. And I kind of mentioned just a little bit about it, I think, off camera in the beginning of what works for me. I'll just go over that just quickly. What works for me when I talk to people is I do not try to teach them anymore. I used to view myself as some sort of hey, I can teach people. It's like, well, that's a huge thing that needs to be done in every, I would say, pretty much all over the planet right now, is a new awakening, a reawakening to what is the truth. So you feel like you need to step up and you need to do something about it. You put the whole weight of the world on your shoulders and say, well, I'm gonna be a teacher. And it took me a long time to figure this out, but that was the wrong mentality at going about it. Was, if I get into a debate with somebody, my purpose, it used to be to find a way to teach them the things that they didn't know, so that maybe they can make better decisions for themselves. And I actually kind of attributed, I'm sure you already know, and some of the listeners know about Joseph Campbell, and how he's got this hero's journey. I've started to realize that hero's journey mentality is the same mentality that I personally thought, hey, I can save the world. Well, who am I? Who am I to think that I can do this? All I can do is work on me. And so I switched and I changed my whole philosophy to lead by example, like I was saying before. However, the way to do it is you speak the truth, and people are going to have appeals to emotion after you speak the truth. And you don't try to teach them anything. All you do is say the truth, and the truth is blunt, and it doesn't need to be watered down. It doesn't need to be nice or any of these things, because at the end of the day, from what I've learned from my own psychology and from dealing with so many people over and over again in the same situation, is that they are going to tell you that you are doing something wrong, and they're going to always flip it around. It's a diversion tactic. It's well known in psychology. They'll always divert it back onto you. So if you tell them something that is the truth, most likely they are living that lie, and it's way too hard for them to deal with on their own. And like you said, later they'll go and they'll self-reflect. They'll look in the mirror and they'll say, maybe I was wrong about that. And that's what usually happens. So if you speak the truth, don't worry about what everybody else is telling you, that you're saying it too hard. You're saying it, you're being too mean about it. You're not being compassionate enough. You're not going, all that slows down the growth process. The growth process, just like we all know, is very hard hitting. The more you fall on your face, the faster you learn. you don't go out, you don't put your baby in a little bubble its whole life to protect it, and so that it doesn't have all these emotions that, will, everybody is so scared to deal with their own emotions and face their own fears. Well, if you let kids go outside and, play in trees, and no matter how scared you are, well, the truth is, the more that you fail, the faster you learn. So if you apply that same principle to talking to people, people are always going to fight you, or they're always going to come up with some excuse. Most of the time, they're all fallacies. Realize, don't go down to their level. You have to, because they're always going to try to suck you down to this emotional level where it's like, well, hey, man, just feel bad for me because it's hard, So it's like, well, it's hard for all of us. What's important is we admit when we're wrong, we tell the truth, and we grow from it. And the only way to do that is to stick to your guns, and don't worry about everybody else saying, well, you're just doing it wrong. Yeah, okay, the truth is important, but you're telling people to, well, we have these egos and these defense mechanisms built up, over time. And I completely understand it, that people have a hard time dealing with trauma. And that's what our ego is for. And that's why we repress our memories. However, when it's safe now, where all of a sudden we're safe, and we can, years later, we can go back and we can deal with these things that cause us to be so combative with each other, and with these defense mechanisms. It's like, as soon as somebody starts saying, the truth about something, you immediately put your defense mechanism up. That's their problem. Don't let them switch around on you. Don't let them pull you down. Just stick to your guns, stay in the truth. The truth can be blunt. And I've learned that over years of people telling me, hey, it's your delivery, man. The way that you're delivering information is just too hard on people. It's not, well, I understand people have had this trauma for years. I understand that. However, there isn't a better way to do it. It's unfortunately, you've made your bed, now you have to lie in it. This is the way that it is, and it's going to be hard. The truth isn't easy. This isn't an easy path. It is the hardest path, and they, like you said before, they kill people for it. And all you can do is speak the truth, even if it shakes your voice. Speak the truth, even if it gets you in trouble, and stick to that. That's all. That's my advice.
Let me just jump in here really quickly. Generally what I've found with, these people that come at me with these huge attacks against my work and stuff, and who haven't read it, and I'll debate them. If they're just willful dupes, usually after about 6 months, or often after about 6 months, they'll contact me back and apologize for their behavior, and say, wow, it all hit me one day. I was driving down the road or whatever. Sometimes it's 2 or 3 months. Sometimes it's a year, but it often hits them,
Exactly.
And, some troll in the chat right now is like, I always silence people like China does. It's like, no, I don't silence people. You present facts and we can have a discussion. If you're just sitting there name calling and making bogus accusations, you get blocked and you get banned. But try to at least provide a modicum of intelligent thought to the discussion. And if you're incapable of doing that, you get banned, and that's as easy as it is, Bob or Ann. So that's how it goes. You're banned.
Well, if you always silenced people, how would you be able to even know that they had said that?
Right, exactly. And not only that, but I did ban them just now. But it's like, they just go on, and so will you silence my speech rather than answer my question? I give you lots of donations. Remember Dr. Sterner in San Diego? Well, where have I silenced people? So I'm not going to let people make false accusations that I sit there and intentionally silence them and don't address their issue. If they don't bring intelligent, and they're saying Dr. Sterner and San Diego, I don't care if they have a doctor's degree or not. Many of the most ignorant people I deal with have a PhD or as we call them, PhDs, have a PhD attached to their name. So, it's like, are you just making a bunch of empty, false accusations? Everybody's having decent chat and the conversations in the chat, and then this one person jumps in and starts making, they say hello, and I say hello back, and then they immediately started making accusations. So it's like, wow, where did that even come from?
Well, see,
but just really quickly, when people come at me, okay, I've studied your work and you have an error here, and here's the citation. Okay. But if you don't even have the wherewithal to look at the work and to check the citations and to present a correction, then don't waste my time, because I don't care about your emotional thinking. It's give me the facts, and if you have none, if you cannot support your own argument, then don't make it. The onus of proof is on whoever makes their own argument. And it's like they'll try to flip the onus of proof on the other person. Well, prove I'm wrong. No, you have to provide your evidence that you even have an argument,
Yeah, I don't think a lot of the people understand the trivia. So they get the trivium. So they get really triggered really quickly when you don't answer their logical fallacy. It's like, well, look, Jan wants this platform to be if you want a response from Jan, give him an actual argument, because most of what you see are not arguments at all. They're just either fallacies or name calling. It's not even worth his time, so he bans you. Well, if you want to have an answer to your question, structure your question in a way that is an actual argument. And if you don't know what that means, take some time to do that before, otherwise you're just shooting yourself in the foot. There's no, the way Jan views the platform, there is no sense in having a circular argument. And that's what you're coming to the table with, something that isn't an argument that's just going to cause you to chase your tail. So he cites the logical fallacy. You don't even understand what that means because you're using the fallacy in the first place. Well, of course, it's just going to be, it's a waste of time. So, yes, it's bad to just completely censor people who have good arguments, I would say. But when the argument of should we censor things on the channel and stuff, it's like, well, you're really detracting time and energy. Like we had to we're going off on tangents from the chat,
from trolls, right, instead of staying on topic, but we're addressing these people who claim we don't address them. So it's like, wow. But if they would come up with sound, reasonable arguments backed with evidence that they can support and supply us with, then we can address it. But if they only come at us with emotional rants and fallacious arguments, the only way you can do is ignore them and push them aside, because it's not worth your time to even deal with somebody usually who won't even give you the respect to even read the work or the citations that you're talking about. And then they say you're wrong, or you're trying to silence them or whatever, or, all of these ridiculous trolls with these empty accounts and stuff. But it's fine because, that they're actually providing us things to show, what the trivium is, how we do the work that we do, and how we come to conclusions or to logos on certain topics. So, I don't mind segueing into these trolls' comments because in a sense, they're not really detracting from the conversation, because that's really what we're trying to get at here is, how do we go through the process of logic and reaching conclusions? And, one of these episodes soon, maybe after the Meek episode, if we all agree on it, we can do something on how to employ the trivium method in thinking and in verifying information coming in, as well as information inside your own mind and information going out. So, and then, for those who haven't taken the time to seriously study the trivium, so then they, at least this way, those who are still grappling with it can, get a better understanding of it rather than just, oh, somebody's too confident, therefore they're wrong,
Yeah, and I got to agree with you on the fact that it's not much of a tangent, because I think really that's what this group is for, is being able to identify those poor thinking patterns and to help others be able to decrease the amount of it that they see. So when we have people come in like that who are thinking poorly, or slandering, making false arguments or accusations and stuff, it provides a actually helps us more than they would probably like to help us, since they seem to hate us talking about this stuff. It ends up just helping us out, because now more people can see exactly what it looks like to be dealing with living in truth and dealing with people that aren't.
The trivium is the biggest wrench that's ever been thrown in the social order
Yeah, right.
machine, right? It really, anybody who gets the trivium and learns how to use it properly and not just for spewing sophist BS, they can't be mind controlled anymore. You can be duped for a while, like, me working with certain people for a time before I got far enough into their research or far enough into other texts to realize that somebody was dirty or whatever, or not on the fly. But if you go in, usually you get that sense, I should fact check this person or get in and check every detail. And sometimes it might, you're busy with life. Sometimes it might take you a year or two to figure out somebody's agenda or whatever. But eventually the trivium will reveal it if you use it and apply it properly.
Yes, it will.
So, it's like if I don't have time to sit down and read a 1,600-page book or something this week, and it takes me 2 years to get through it to discover that somebody is dirty, that somebody has spun a whole lie, say, for instance, like, Titus invented the idea of logos or something like that. And, and then you can, then you get in and you read this book, and it's like, oh, well, these sort of tricks are explained right here in the book itself. Right. So then you see it and you can push those people out and realize, wow, that's not, that's not in truth. And I no longer want to work with that person. So yeah, it's just, and somebody wrote, this is why the trivium saves us so much time. And that's true in a general sense. And, the issue is, the first step in the trivium is your intuition goes off. You get that funny feeling, something's not right, I should check this. And then it's like, okay, do I have the time to check this? Do I make it a priority? And now I'm realizing that whenever I get that funny feeling, I should make it a priority right then, instead of waiting or putting it off until I can find more time. Because generally when that happens, that implicit funny feeling, when you check it, it becomes an explicit, okay, here's the fallacies that they're using, here's the tricks that they're using. Now I know for 100% certain that this person is lying or is, trying to trick me or trick my audience, etc. So using that, with the trivium, you can at least get in and begin to understand it, whether you do it right then on the fly or down the road or whatever. It's eventually, if you apply it to the circumstance, it will eventually expose them. And that's why, we see so many attempts out there now to spin the trivium method that we put out, in October 2009, to spin it back into the sophist method, which is the inverse. There's always that inversion process that they use. The Satanists and the Kabbalists love to invert everything. So they take the trivium, and instead of using it to find truth, they inverse it, and then they use it to deceive people. So this is like why there's the classical trivium and the trivium method. The trivium method is used for finding and for sharing truth. The classical trivium, and those who manipulate it and use it for control, they invert it, and then they use it, the same tools, instead of for truth, for deceiving and hurting other people and taking advantage of them.
Exactly. Yeah, just so people are clear on, well, at least I can't speak for everybody, but at least where I'm coming from, there aren't any specific topics that are just completely off topic that I'll censor. I'll discuss anything, but
the chat group is upset at us for even addressing those troll
For even
comments.
addressing trolls.
Right.
Well, so here's the thing. You have a dilemma. You have, of course, you want to move forward in telling people what the truth is. However, you also know that the trivium is the starting point. That's the square one. So if you don't spend a lot of time addressing these people, they're never going to learn, you know, how to make a correct argument. So, you know, so that's Jan's biggest, you know, he wants to get the truth out there, but at the same time, people can't handle the truth because they don't know the trivium. So he has to spend time addressing, and it's this huge problem where, you know, you don't want to address the trolls, but at the same time, you want to be open and you don't want to censor anybody. But you know, it's like, well, what do? Do you spend all your time focusing on getting everybody on square one, or do you move forward from there and then you just ban people who have who try to take you back, and you know,
a mix
you're
of both.
constantly trying to move forward, or a mix of both. So just so people understand, it isn't so cut and dry of what, you know, what
Right,
is.
you know, and as we go through the process, the 80-some people who are listening or watching this right now, some of them may have never heard of the trivium, and they may not be familiar with the processes of critical thinking. And so as we lay these things out, they begin to see, oh, okay, maybe there is another reason. And not only that, but when you engage in a troll, it's not necessarily, and this is a tactic that the left uses as well, the Satanists use, but you're not necessarily addressing the troll. You're addressing the audience so that they can see the tactics of the troll and see the limited thinking of this type of behavior, so that they learn not to make those same mistakes. You know, and then you know, it's like, what is the trivium? Well, it's grammar, logic, rhetoric, and it breaks down to simple things that all of us learned in 3rd and 4th grade: who, what, where, when, why, and how. Who, what, where, and when, our gathering or data gathering process, our knowledge gathering. Why is our understanding, all of the contradictions are removed, and how is the rhetoric, the explanation of how exactly we arrived at the conclusion, and the path that anyone else can take to verify that conclusion. So if they don't understand that we're using an exact method that anyone can go and check and say, oh, okay, this is how they came to the conclusion, or, oh, okay, here is a mistake that they found, you know, then they're not going to get it. But if they at least go through the process, who, what, where, when, why, and how, check the stuff, you know, go through our analysis of the information, then they should arrive, like Mark said earlier, they should arrive at the exact same conclusion. It's like a wheel, you know, and if you have all these people approaching the topic from different directions, like all the spokes of the wheel meet at the hub. So eventually everybody should arrive at the same or very similar conclusions if they're following the process of data gathering, understanding things. There are no contradictions in nature. So whenever you see a contradiction, 100% of the time, it's a lie or an error. You know, if somebody says, well, you know, we can agree to disagree, well, they're saying, well, we should agree to accept a lie or a deception or an error. You know, that's what they're actually saying. So this isn't critical thinking. This is the omission or the rejection of critical thinking, rather than saying, okay, if there's a contradiction, what that really means is I don't have enough information yet, and I need to dig further down into the information until no more contradictions exist. And when that happens, you have the epiphany, that aha moment, and you know you've arrived at the truth, and then you can be confident in the information that you've gathered.
Yeah, exactly. And there are actually still people in the chat that supposedly do not know what the trivium is. So I will just, I would personally recommend you go and check out the shows Yan has done. He woke me up to the trivium. He's done plenty of shows on the trivium. You can look on his the YouTube, and he also has his own website called triviumeducation.com. There it is. He just posted it in the chat.
And I'll show it on screen here for everyone too. So there you go, everybody.
If you're just looking for a general idea of what it is, in my own words, it is the most efficient, best way. And when I say best, I don't think there's anything better. If there is, I'd like to hear about it. But it is the best way to think. And that's why we call it critical thinking, is because it eliminates all the problems that people have in their own mind when they think about any topic. And it also works. It's the best way to communicate what you're thinking to another human being. That's really a basic breakdown of what it is, in my opinion.
Correct. Well said. Stephen?
Was there a question directed at me?
No, you just look like you've been waiting to say something for a while or whatever, like we've ignored you or something. So,
Oh, no, not a problem. I was just reading through the comments on the YouTube channel here.
has anybody said anything that we should be addressing or?
Well, I guess if I got the mic for a second, I'll just quick say that trivium is, isn't it a Latin word meaning three ways?
Yeah, it's what, the three roads, something like that.
V is Latin for road, but yeah, three roads. So the three roads are the grammar, logic, and rhetoric, and as we've been talking about. But you really got to understand how these things work, with the grammar being the bulk of it, and logic kind of being how to process what's there, and rhetoric being sort of the end all product of it. What you talk, like what you take away from it. These are the trivium, which leads you into the quadrivium, which allows you to use the trivium skills to be able to explore the greater universe of science and arithmetic and music and geometry.
Well, it's arithmetic, geometry, music, and astronomy.
Yep.
In that order. And the trivium is grammar, logic, and then rhetoric. So grammar is your data gathering, your knowledge. Logic is your understanding, your why, and then rhetoric is your explanation, your how. And
Yes.
Everybody was taught this in third, fourth grade, but sometimes even second grade, but they're not given the full explanation of what it really is, because, and I should say, for those who haven't caught on, it is also historically, you can consider it the Holy Trinity. It was how people came to truth, to find God, and God was truth, or truth was God, however you want to put that. And then, Satan was the deceiver, the liar, etc. So you have truth, and then you have deception, and then you have the Satanist trying to create all of this moral relativism. Well, there is no truth. We have quantum physics. We have
snow is black.
Snow is black, right? You can't know anything for sure. Quantum physics, yada yada yada, all this kind of stuff.
How do you know that?
Right. How do you know what's true? How do you know 2 + 2 is 4? Can you really know?
How do you know we can't know anything?
Right. Well, and what my favorite is.
I didn't think I'd get this far.
My favorite of comment from these types is there is no truth. Well, let me ask you this: how do you know that assertion is true? Right.
I have people say that all the time too. It's really easy to kind of break it down into objective and subjective. Everybody realizes that there is truth when somebody realizes that there's a lie. So if I tell you that this pen is black, I'm telling you the truth. If I tell you this pen is blue, it's a lie. I mean, that's very
unless
simple.
The ink is blue.
Yeah.
And now some people will try to distinguish that it's not a lie if you really believe it. If you really
moral relativism, right?
Yeah, if you really believe that pen is blue, you weren't lying. You were just mistaken. Like,
is the glass?
It's still a lie.
80% empty or 20% full?
Yeah. It's wrong. A truth is something that is right, and the opposite of a truth is a lie or an error. So
yep. And our job is to align our perceptions with the truth, not to say that our perceptions are truth. That's the inversion.
Mm-hmm.
Now, and we should probably get into this sometime. Kermit says religion is retarded fairy tale out of the same mouth as people promoting quantum physics. Religion is to align or realign, and it should be in alignment with truth. But, obviously there are a lot of quote-unquote religions that don't put truth as the supreme thing. It's like Mark mentioned earlier, I worship truth, Truth should be your number one goal in seeking all things, because when you seek truth, you can always see the deceptions and be able to protect yourself and your family from those deceptions. But people don't want us to know what truth is. so that we can't defend ourselves from the deceivers and those who wish to take advantage of us, etc. So when we get these things and we get that it's just, to me, the ultimate religion is truth, and the ultimate antithesis to that religion would be Satanism, because all it is about constant deception and manipulating others and taking advantage of others, etc. But when, what the trivium does is it levels the playing field and makes the deceivers impotent. It takes their power away from them so that they have no effect on the rest of us. And then it's like, okay, yeah, I see what your gig is, and you can dismiss them like these trolls, etc. But you have to come to an understanding. And, I recommend people get into the trivium and do the full 2-year study. Get the books that are up on the trivium website, go through all of the talks and begin to get your mind around it. If you practice just the logical fallacies, after about 2 months, you'll start to catch the fallacies in your own thinking, and then you'll stop those. And, after a while, you'll start to see them in other people's thoughts and in the information that's coming in at you. But, it takes a while to become totally fluid with it. And once you do, it really protects you and yours, and it shows you who the deceivers are, just based on truth. And is Stoicism equal to real Christianity? Myself and a few people believe that Stoicism was an attempt to steal things out of real Christianity and turn it into a philosophy, rather than recognizing that that is the true Christianity. That's why the trivium itself, the trivium, the logo, grammar, logic, rhetoric, with truth in the center, that was likely co-opted into Father, Son, Holy Ghost with Deus or God in the center. That's just my opinion. That may offend some people, but there is an aspect to God that is truth, to Jesus being truth incarnate. How does God, for instance, come and teach us truth? So then it's like you have the concept of Jesus as this person who came to teach the truth, because there was no medium in between to bridge the gap between pure truth as God and we, the fallen people, essentially. Anybody have anything to add to that or correct me on that or anything?
Sounds about right.
No, we've talked about this several times. That's exactly what it looks like to me.
I'd actually just like to add on a little bit about religion and how everybody's religious, whether or not they realize it, because there's quite a few people out there that hold anti-religious sentiments, or you mention religion and they're all like, oh, like,
that dialectic, you can't, atheist, well, I'm against God, right? I'm against truth.
I'm anti-religious, religiously. Like,
yeah,
okay, dude.
exactly.
So it's definitely worth noting. Hans Utter actually got me thinking about it on one of the music, mind control, and psychobiology talks. He was just talking about all the cybernetic loops and things that we do throughout our day without really thinking about it, like brushing our teeth every morning or something, and it got me thinking about, like, well, what do people do religiously, and what does religion really boil down to, beyond acknowledging that you follow a certain holy text or a certain lifestyle. The more you look at it, everybody has a religion, whether or not they are vocal or aware of it.
Well, and one of the biggest things, like I was saying at the beginning, is defining our key terms, because a lot of people will listen to a word we say and define it based on their definition, which may or may be different than our religion. So a definition of something like religion, if you're defining it as something that you need belief or faith, blind faith in, is completely separate from something that I would define it as. Or if you're using that definition, then I would definitely say that I do not advocate in religion if it's just blind faith as opposed to truth. And if you're religiously worshiping the truth, would you say that that's a religion? This is why things need to be rigorously defined when we have these questions.
And so I've been phasing out nouns a little bit and trying to be more verb oriented. So instead of saying like, oh, you're stupid, you're being stupid, it's the action of being, because who's to say whether or not someone's actually like dumb altogether? I am not in that position.
That's true. That's definitely true. And when we define our key terms, we have to use proper grammar. That's a very big thing. So we can actually communicate more efficiently.
So religion could really just be summed up as religious activity. The way that Jan researches every day, that it's somehow that fits into, you could define it if you really wanted to. The way that people eat, if you eat 3 meals a day or something, if you're on keto, you're religiously on keto or something.
Where's my coffee?
Religiously drinking coffee.
Somewhere. Darn it.
I religiously take care of my bonsai plants every day. I'm attending to them. I wouldn't say that I'm like in the cult of the bonsai, but when I think about it, I cultivate them, and I meet with other people.
You
to
cultivate
talk about
them. You cultivate them.
Yeah, and so that's another thing. Is cult? It has a very negative connotation to it too, where a cult is really just a group of people meeting to discuss a certain topic.
Well, no, that's actually church. 2 or more meeting in my name is.
Yeah, so it's church or cult, depending on what language you use. So, yeah, definitions can be shaky.
Yeah, so, what we should do is, for this series, make a, come up with something about defining the terms, and that's part of what this is about, this Logos Roundtable. And for those of you who weren't here at the beginning, Mark was here at the beginning, and we were, this is all about a new roundtable discussion group that we're going to have and try to do regularly, like once a week or whatever. But and just picking a topic and then having a moderator. The moderator would change each week, and then clearly we need to have something in there about defining the terms. And holding the floor and not interrupting each other. It's like, have the clock or have like the talking stick or whatever, so we'll have to, yes, Peter says beards only. When you say you're cultivating your bonsais, it's like I have to trim my beard every day,
Yeah,
Maintaining a beard is a lot of work, man. It's like, geez, I had no idea. It's not... when it starts getting long, it's like, whoa, that's a cult right there. Got to religiously trim it. But, so let's see. Somebody said, if you wish to converse with me, define your terms, Voltaire. Well said. Thanks, Real Raccoons.
And actually, one of my projects that I've been working on for a while, and so far I have mostly just scientific terms because I was doing it for a scientific project, debunking all the various falsely defined and falsely completely incorrect grammar that the scientific world uses, but I've been working on a dictionary of sort of just writing down the most rational definition. It's more of a rational dictionary, and you're completely just reordering the words that you're defining for your key terms so that they are all completely rational. And in order for them to be rational, they have to be grammatically correct, they have to fit into the trivium, etc. And they're always open to being changed, like the original idea of Wikipedia was supposed to be, but we all know Wikipedia was definitely not a grassroots movement like they said it was, but something similar where we could all be on the same page. That's what's important, is if we're on the same page with our definitions, we don't have to waste time defining them over and over and over again, except for new people that are new to the definition.
Right.
Yeah, I was going to say we should make a roundtable dictionary, but it sounds like Caleb's already got
well, what I was saying was I'm kind of on top of it as far as the scientific dictionary for scientific terms. If you're interested in what that is, for instance, a lot of people will say in the scientific community something like they'll define a wave as and give a whole definition based on the term a wave. But most people don't realize this, but a wave isn't a thing. To wave is a verb. So something has to be waving. So they say, oh, well, this is a wave of this or that. It's like, well, you first of all, you already screwed up the grammar, because my hand can wave, water can wave, you can't have a wave. So you have to start over right off the bat and define it completely differently. That's just one example, but I have tons and tons of scientific examples. But like I was saying, it'd be cool if we put together something collectively for the terms we discuss on these chats. That would be great, and I think would be very useful. And we probably would get a lot more out of it than we even realize.
And we could probably put the definitions in the show notes or whatever too, of here's the definition we're using. And if somebody wants to argue, it's like, well, did you read the definitions we used? Did you do your grammar first?
Exactly. That way, when somebody says religion is bullshit, it's like, well, what do you mean by religion? Here's our definition. Do you disagree with our definition, or is your definition of
right?
Of it?
Usually when people attack Christianity, they have this idea of like Santa Claus sitting on a throne floating in heaven, right? And then that's because of, I think it was you, Stephen, that brought up the deification with Bertrand Russell. And
no.
So
I brought up deification, but it was totally unrelated.
Oh, okay. And so when we understand deification takes us away from understanding the truth, then we can begin to grasp these concepts a little more.
Well, deification even rolls over into the 50s through the early 2000s, and even into today with pop culture icons. These people are propped up as almost beyond human. Even with the way that they use mysticism and stuff, these people are harboring spirits that help them do these things, and whatnot.
I'll be right back, guys.
Oh, okay. But yeah, so that is part of the old school deification, the new school rock stars or rock idols or whatever, through the music industry. The deification was the process of deifying a person and bringing them above the human genome, I guess. You become more than human. You become a god. And this is covered in Joseph Atwill's book, which I know Jan and him don't get along, and his book is also kind of bullshit with the flamenco evidence, but he covers deification a little bit with the ceremony that they did with Caesar. Apparently, he dies for 3 days and then comes back as a god, and then God walks among the people. I think in older Norse mythology, the gods of Odin and Thor, they actually came into the cities supposedly with presents and gifts, and whenever the gods showed up, that's when the feasts were the best, because the gods brought in the best stuff. But more than likely, it was just a person, an alpha male type figure that provided for a community, and that's how they remembered him, by posting him up as beyond human. This person was a god. He became deified in their history, and that's now weaponized through people like Terrence McKenna and Timothy Leary and Jordan Peterson. If you ever even have the balls to mutter anything that could be considered disrespectful about them, their loyal followers are ready and armed to defend their gods.
I had one this morning or last night who was upset that I dared mention Terrence McKenna was a part of that, because Terrence McKenna taught us how to grow mushrooms at home, and that freed us from all of the chemical drugs of the CIA. Yeah, sure. Or it was the CIA's plot to get everybody to make the drugs at home, to dispense them out to the public faster so that they could use these suggestogens, because they cause hypersuggestibility, which makes you more easily controllable, quicken the speed at which they were dispersed out to society so that they could use the hypersuggestion to control the population more easily and give them a false religion, not focused on truth, but, on being high and out of your mind, like I was when I was in my 20s and early 30s, before I figured out that all of this stuff was a fraud, so, and writing books on this stuff. And, I thought, boy, this is the true religion. They've suppressed it. Well, it's like, Timothy Leary's fake firing by Harvard, so that he
fake escape from jail,
so that it looks like his spiritual message is being suppressed, and that's the real truth, not the truth itself. And it's like, never mind. It's like, okay, so the fruit of the tree, is that the true religion? If you eat the fruit, is that the true religion? Yeah, your eyes will be opened, and it's like, okay, then it took me years to start realizing concepts of like Pan's Garden and whatnot.
We got almost 90 viewers watching now.
We had over 90 a minute ago.
And if you guys haven't gone yet on YouTube to check out a conversation on LSD, you got to check that out, because you can't.
It's on my channel, folks.
You can't watch that and say, oh yeah, all these guys, they didn't even really know each other and they were just kind of scattered. Things were happening there, things were happening here, all these random people, like Timothy Leary is sitting right next to the guy that went public with LSD as he's in his police outfit too. You got
Al Hubbard, yeah, the Johnny Appleseed, and he was a OSS agent, and I've shown the documentation that show he was still an agent, and Willis Harriman was right there in that discussion too. Willis Harriman was, SRI, CIA, Changing Images of Man, was right there in the knowledge of that. And people should read my Spies in Academic Clothing article, because all that stuff is right there. But yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. And I have the transcripts.
Sidney Cohen, Al Hubbard, Tim Leary, Humphrey Osmond, John Lilly, Laura Huxley, Wills Harmon, Nick Purcell, and all sorts of other people, all on this video talking about what they did to the American population. And then the American population's never seen the video, so they're like, well, nobody does that. What do you mean? Like,
right. And I'm showing on I'm showing on screen right now. I have the entire transcript. Yep. I need to get that finished and post it. I did this transcript several years ago, and it's just one more thing that needs to get done, but it popped into my mind last night that I needed to get it done, and then you bring it up this morning, so it's like, get it done.
Hosted by Oscar Janiger, Allen Ginsberg's cousin.
Another CIA agent, MK Ultra operative, etc.
Another pedophile too.
Well, was he a pedophile?
Allen Ginsberg?
Oh, well, Ginsberg for sure. I thought you meant Janiger.
His cousin. Yeah, maybe. I'm starting to get to the point where I'm starting to think that a lot of the stuff that these people do, whether it's out of their own willingness to do it because they're actually attracted to minors, or if they're pressured into doing it to get into a society, as you had covered one time about you have to kill your wife and to get into some group.
Well, yeah, both William Burroughs and Allen Ginsberg killed their wives.
So, yeah, you look at some of these rituals.
And they were gay lovers together.
So you got to wonder how much of that was because they naturally just did that themselves, or it's a long, long history of these types of rituals of initiation. And because you do this, they have that over you for the rest of your life. They know that you did that.
Well, William Burroughs and Allen Ginsberg published it. William Burroughs wrote it, or they're his letters. It's called the Yogi Letters, right? Mm-hmm. And the book is the most disgusting book I've ever read. It's William Burroughs' trip all over South America, diddling kids and murdering people.
Yeah.
It's absolutely disgusting. But anyway.
Terrence McKenna. He's in the video too. A young Terrence McKenna sitting in the background before.
Is he in that video?
Yeah, he's sitting in the background, in the back corner, I think to the back left of what's his name? Albert Hubbard.
I didn't realize that McKenna was there. So if McKenna was there, that proves that he knew it was all CIA up.
The reason I even brought this up was because of Al Hubbard's confident just brag that they had all the drugs. They were experimenting on all the drugs. They had LSD, and LSD wasn't even the most potent, is what he says, is out of all the things that they had synthesized from all the different drugs that I think he even mentions ayahuasca by name. And so you got this guy in police outfit talking with all of these psychedelic heroes of the counter-revolution or whatever. And then the mushroom thing takes off again after they get the science and they've done the research in the 50s with Gordon Wasson. Not a whole lot of people know who Wasson is. A lot more people know who McKenna is. And that's because the science had been collected, weaponized, and then put out onto the people still to today. I would have never taken mushrooms had I not looked into Terrence McKenna and been like, wow, aliens and
Well,
mushrooms.
and I'm the ass who, in my late 20s, early 30s, inherited the collection of She Who Remembers archives on cassette tape and encoded all that crap to MP3. And then I also gave a copy over to Joe Rogan, you know, because he and I were friends for 8 years, and then he became the poster boy and decided to make a huge living off of promoting all of that. So, you know, and then, you know, I go on his show, and the first 37 minutes, him and Brian are making dick jokes and interrupting the whole conversation to keep derailing it. That's just my personal opinion of the events. But people are free to watch that whole interview. It's one of the 2 worst interviews I've ever done. But, you know, it was just awful. But, yeah, I mean, you know, I put a lot of that early McKenna audio stuff out. You know, probably 30 to 50% of what's out there today came from the She Remembers archives that I inherited. And, you know, by the time I was done encoding all of that stuff to MP3, I never wanted to hear the stuff again. I was just absolutely sick of him. But I still, you know, back then it was Napster or WinMX or something like that, and you put it on your computer and people could download directly from you. And so, you know, I shared all of this stuff, and now all of those archives are out on YouTube and everywhere. And it's like, man, I sure wish that's probably the biggest mistake I ever made, was putting that crap out online. I should have just let it die off, you know?
Well, it's interesting going back and looking at it with a new perspective of what actually happened.
Right.
Yeah, I don't know if you should completely regret that. You know, it's like the way I look at it.
Well, how many people's minds were infected with that CIA crap, you know?
True.
Well, that's true, but at the same time, it's people's own responsibility. It isn't your responsibility to educate people. It's people's own responsibility. And if you know, a lot of good can come out of you know, stuff like that. Like, for instance, my story, you know, like I would never change the way that it happened for me. I would never go back and change it because it created who I am today. And I'm glad that the information was out there, because it allowed me to discern. I had to build up my ability for discernment, and the way that I had to build that up was I had to learn both sides of everything. Not just, you know, one side. And you know what I mean? I would never know what to believe if I didn't have the stuff that you uploaded versus my own personal experience, and then the stuff that I'd rather have both, is what I'm saying. So I don't
have both
necessarily
perspectives. Well, you know, I spun out in that whole field for 15 years, and it's like, all right, so, you know, now putting this information out, if I can spare people the time of believing that that's anything but a CIA manufactured religion. And again, for those who don't believe it, read Manufacturing the Deadhead, or no, read Entheogens, What's in a Name, sorry, where I go through and I break down how they marketed the whole idea of the religious experience. And they had 2 teams, Aldous Huxley, Myron Stolaroff, and, Humphrey Osmond and Abram Hoffer on one side, and then Gordon Wasson, Carl Ruck, Jonathan Ott, and Jeremy Bigwood made up Team 2. Team 1 made up hallucinogen, psychedelic, psychotomimetic, and what was the other one that Aldous Huxley? It was a total flop. And then Gordon Wasson and Carl Ruck and them on Team 2, CIA Team 2, they came up with the entheogen word. And basically what they wanted to say was, oh, those people back then, they didn't know better. Of course, they don't mention that it was Aldous Huxley and all the people that they worked with who created the term psychedelic. And you know, that's the only word in the English language that's psych rather than psycho, because they didn't want the connotation psycho in there. So they made it an E to play down that it, you know, was psycho, like psychotomimetic, which means to mimic psychosis. So they made it psychedelic, supposedly a mishmash to manifest the mind when it, you know, and then the same people, and then the same people years later would go back to the earlier terms like psychotomimetics while they fed the psychedelic term to the public. And then after CIA agent Timothy Leary ruined that word and popularized the drugs to the public, oh, he ruined it for all of us who that's the official story. Then Team 2 developed the word entheogen under the guidance of Professor Carl Ruck at Boston University. And for those, who want to know who Carl Ruck is, go back and see episode 1 of Gnostic Media. That was my very first podcast with that guy. I used to work with these people and think that they were legit scholars, but, over the years of fact-checking their work, and I completely exposed Carl Ruck in the Entheogens What's in a Name article. They're all frauds, and not one of them has sued me for putting out these articles that expose every detail of what they did and all their primary citations and everything, and not one of them will ever address the citations either. All they do is attack me. They make ad hominem attacks. So, yeah,
Well,
schizophrenogen was another one that the same teams made up.
Well, even going deeper into the entheogen thing, and again, looping back to the deification.
Right, and I coined the word suggestogen in writing that article because reading through all of their stuff, it was like suggest, and I was like, suggestogen. So, sorry, did I interrupt you, or were you done?
That was it. I mean,
okay.
Just the generating of gods within, becoming a god and having gods within you and whatnot. And then to be with Terence McKenna promoting the whole stoned ape theory. Oh, yeah, we're people eating mushrooms thousands of years ago. We got real stoned and now we're here and we're ascending into the next level of human consciousness, which is we're going to all be gods, and all this reality is only created because we're here, and solipsism is true. And
man, I actually feel stupid, especially when you say it like that. And I forever fallen for it, because I have to be honest, I used to worship McKenna a long time ago.
I did too.
I had
had
all
no
his
idea.
stuff, man. Who put out the stupid archives?
But I cannot believe I ever fell for. I mean, looking back on it, it's like time wave zero theory, stoned ape, 2012. All this shit was. I cannot believe I fell for.
Yeah,
all
it's all CIA crap. And in fact, I'm going to show McKenna on screen here so people can see all of his intel ties. And that goes for Dennis as well. And Dennis has done hit pieces on me at the Free Your Mind conference, and I've answered it, but of course his video gets pushed out there. But all the Reds are confirmed spies and agents, etc. But he's involved with all these eugenicists like John B.S. Haldane, and the time wave zero theory came from Pierre Teilhard de Chardin, and he was behind the Piltdown hoax, another major fraud. And another big guy behind this was Theodosius Dobzhansky, the eugenicist. Now, his son-in-law was Professor Emeritus Michael Coe. Michael Coe was another CIA agent. You can find that right on Wikipedia. It even admits that he was a CIA agent. Let's see. Coe worked as a CIA case officer, it says right there. But so Coe, he invents the Maya thing in his book. I think it was just the Maya or Secrets of the Maya. And then Terence McKenna takes that up and then runs with it with the stupid, 2012 thing. Originally, Coe made it 2011. And then you have guys like Daniel Pinchbeck. And then, of course, Daniel Pinchbeck goes and interviews him. Of course, never mentions that he was CIA. Daniel Pinchbeck doesn't mention that he lived with Allen Ginsberg and William Burroughs and these pedophiles when he was growing up, and that his mom Joyce Glassman, was part of the Greenwich Village MK Ultra team. She was lovers of Jack Kerouac, who is another beatnik and MK Ultra guy, and so when you get into these things, you can start seeing all these people are working the intel thing. And then, of course, Pinchbeck, he likes to work with Gordon Sumner or Sting. And, of course, Sting, the band The Police. Well, that's a big, see, there they are right there. And that's a big, Sting's a big Crowleyite. And then the band The Police, let's see, Stuart Copeland was the drummer. Stuart Copeland is the son of Miles Copeland. Miles Copeland was, along with Gregory Bateson and others, the founder of the CIA. So, I mean, we never have to go far to link these clowns back to each other. It's a constant short little loop, like 1 to 3 degrees separation. They constantly loop back between each other. And then we can begin to see the patterns of, how they manipulate us. William Burroughs, the pedophile and murderer and assassin. He was a big Hassani Sabah guy, CIA, MI6, pedophilia. He was another beatnik there. But all of these guys are involved in all of this stuff, And then,
Hey,
go ahead.
hey, Jan, is David Wilcock in the brain database?
I think so, but let's not segue off that yet. I
All right.
haven't flushed that out. It's like one more.
Yeah, I was going to ask
It's
about
like Graham Hancock, and Hancock
Yeah.
and McKenna were buddies, and Hancock was one of the first to attack me when I came out exposing McKenna, etc. And I've hammered on Hancock for years for his participation. Then of course Hancock and Rupert Sheldrake did that whole TED Talk, display to drag attention to their bogus presentation and pretend like TED was suppressing their message. Where have we heard that before, even in this conversation? TED Talks was suppressing their valid research, and it's true. That's why they're suppressing it. Not total bullshit, not because Rupert Sheldrake is Royal Society and, and they're all in on this whole fraud together, right? It's just... It's just that their spiritual message is being suppressed, like Leary and the others.
Have you gotten a chance to go over The Ultimate Revolution by Aldous Huxley, Berkeley speech, 1962?
I think so, maybe. Did I on RBN? Wasn't that like show number 2? I went through that and did a breakdown of that talk. I don't remember.
Maybe. Well, it's relevant to the talk here based off of one of the passages where he's talking about studies on suggestibility, of course, where apparently 1/5 of people are very, very difficult to persuade into believing something through regular means of conversation without needing severe invasive technology. And on the opposite end of the spectrum, about 1/5 of people are able to be persuaded just about anything. And
even
so
that Hancock's work is true.
Yeah, or yeah, that we're
people are in the chat like, I hope Hancock isn't discredited just by guilt by association. No, it's like none of his work is verifiable and yada yada.
It's definitely his work that discredits him and not his associates.
I went through his book Supernatural, and I had already read and debunked like 70% of the citations that he used in that book. That was the foundation of his work.
So yeah, he's talking about suggestibility in the 60s, and you're familiar with Jose Delgado's work that comes about in the 70s and 80s.
Oh yeah. So I'm going to show that up here too. The guy that did the bowl stuff.
So really, this all comes full swing again back to the impact of science on society, because these are scientific techniques that are being used to manipulate the public, and the introduction of being able to get everyone taking these psychedelics, just like the conversation from LSD. It was like the carnival. Everyone wanted to go. It was word of mouth. Everyone had a great time and felt like they got away and something really great happened. And so everyone started taking these psychedelics across the world. And then as soon as that happened, look how quickly in the last 40 years it's gone downhill from there, where everything leading up to that revolution was a very heavy fight on how exactly are we going to get into these people's minds to get them to do what we want to do. And it's just an interesting side note on how all this wraps around into the present day, because a lot of this stuff leads up into this speech is 1962, the book I'm researching is 1952. There's some stuff in the 70s, but there's not a whole lot of talk right now about what's currently going on with social engineering, what scientific techniques have progressed into a new form, and exactly where is it taking place. My personal thought is just because it's still classified. A lot of this stuff I look into is declassified, so we can't talk about it.
Oh, goodness. Yeah, man, we're almost at 2.5 hours here. My goodness, wasn't expecting that. Anybody care to throw us a super chat today? Throw in any donations? Got 102, 103 viewers right now. That's pretty decent for a unscheduled morning show. Not bad at all. But hopefully people are, hopefully we laid out a little bit. I mean, this was really just supposed to be what we were going to do for the Logos Roundtable, but I guess, it ended up being that. I don't know that it'll be 2.5 hour sessions. This ended up really being just a bro chat or something, but
It's been informative for the public.
What's that?
It's been informative for the public.
Right. I hope when we actually get started on it, we stick to our time frames and our the moderation and things like that. So we'll have to work on that a bit.
Yeah, when Mark was on and we had a moderator, Mark, earlier, it was going in a good direction. I like that. When he left, we kind of went off on our own. But it was a great test run, and I love the platform. It's a great idea. I think we'll get a lot from this for sure. I'm excited.
And thanks, Polygonal, for throwing us $5. Much appreciated.
I think a big part of the defining what the Logos Roundtable is going to be doing is, again, putting out the grammar and rhetoric about what's happened in the past. What are we up against?
Yeah. Well, and providing the tools for how to move forward and how to protect ourselves and our families, and how to be real men and women about it when we have female guests. So
exactly.
Yeah, and hopefully this inspires this series inspires people to step up to the plate and take some of that on, and turn the TV off and step up to.
Do people still have TVs?
Oh yeah.
Wow.
I mean,
I haven't watched TV and
it's not cable anymore. Now they're binging on Netflix and Hulu.
Well, I guess I'll binge on. Well, I shut off my Netflix a couple times, but most recently when they teamed up with the Obamas, that was like, all right, I'm cutting that funding.
I have an interesting take on it. I decided that because the majority of people that I meet on a day-to-day basis all think in terms of television shows, etc. I decided that I would try to take it upon myself, whether it was good or bad, influence on my own mind to decipher some of these TV shows and movies and look into the symbolism. And I've been taking screenshots of all the little references to this and that and all the little mind control stuff that they throw in there. And I took it upon myself to, when I can, I sometimes I get overwhelmed and I just go a long time without doing it, but every once in a while I'll check in. And you'd be surprised. One thing that is just blowing my mind right now is if you check out I'm kind of really big into my roots and kind of studying the history of my ancestors. So now that I'm reading flamenco, I've been checking out a little bit of the inversion stuff they're doing on television. And if you go watch, if there are people out there, because I know the world is addicted to their TV shows, the series Vikings, and a couple other series like that the History Channel does, because I believe the History Channel gives away the truth by inverting everything. So that's one way. It's like a Rosetta Stone. You really get to see the lie because they put it right out there for the brainwashing. So your mind would be blown if you went back and looked into, like, say, reading flamenco and then go watch some Game of Thrones. It's crazy. They throw all that stuff in there and then they invert it into the kings who are good. They invert them into bad. The same thing with, all the History Channel stuff. So, but
it's like Genghis Khan and stuff.
Genghis Khan.
If you look at all the wars for the last couple of 100 years, they've all been against former Tartary areas, former areas of Genghis Khan's, like what's the biggest one I can think of? Afghanistan. Oh yeah. Huh.
Yeah.
Another part of this mass defection thing, though, is with the TV. I even mentioned this at the beginning, is that people are way more educated and ready to tell you about every single character on the Game of Thrones than they are about any sort of military action from history.
I've never seen it. I think I tried to watch it once and I was like, what the heck is this? I don't get it. And I shut it off, or I got bored or fell asleep or something.
I don't recommend it. I definitely don't recommend it. But it's like I said, I took it upon myself because I feel like I have a way to shield some of that brainwashing.
Well, I've taken it
to try
upon
to talk.
myself, as when you were talking about relating to stuff and people can relate to their shows and whatnot. Like,
Yeah,
you may use Superman as an example, like, oh yeah, like this dude, not even Superman could do that or something. And like, you could present it in a way that goes back on something that's real and like actually had an impact other than some sort of fictional character. Like, I was even going to use like SpongeBob as a example for something the other day, and I caught myself before I did. I was like, you know what, I could probably think of something historically that actually happened that could explain what I'm feeling and going through more than SpongeBob.
yeah. No, I hear that. I mean, people brings that stuff up so often. I feel like the best way for me to segue into stuff that I like to talk about is, oh, hey, did you know that the whole entire Viking story about the women warriors is completely made up? There wasn't any women warriors, or whatever it may be, and
Yeah.
segues into something. I've just found it to be a little bit helpful to learn some of the pop culture that I despise so much, because I can use it. I feel like I can use it against them. Because like debunking things has just been so. I've had a lot of success with that. When I talk to somebody about something, I'd be like, "Hey, did you realize that is a complete, fallacy? That this was actually that way?" And they'll go, "No, I didn't know that." And then they'll actually look into it, because they're like, "Well, because people naturally, that's why Snopes is popular. People naturally are scared of being given wrong information. So if you try to teach people how to think as opposed to what to think, that kind of brings this whole show full circle back to the beginning of what we were trying to get at with our with discussing the logos and the alpha and everything. Is we really need to try to, any way we can, use any resource we can to get people to figure out how to think on their own, rather than tell them exactly what to think. It's like, Yan, you, me, we all decided that we would take our knowledge and understanding into our own hands and fact check the fact checkers, and not just listen to what people say, but do primary sources. And so that's what we want to convince other people to do. And that's the way that you're never going to have an argument with somebody and win if they don't have the primary sources that you're arguing against, because it's right off the bat, it's a logical fallacy for them to even argue something they don't understand. So how are you going to, it's kind of a waste of time. So if we convince people if we convince people how to think, to go research for themselves these primary sources that we're putting out, then we take that whole step out of it, where we get in this trap of arguing back and forth over something that.
Sorry, somebody was asking if I have information debunking Graham Hancock. There's a whole website by Jason Colavito who debunked Graham Hancock and some of these other people, but Graham Hancock was hugely influenced by Aldous Huxley, George Orwell, who was Aldous Huxley's student, Terence McKenna. His books are published by Disinformation Corporation. If that doesn't tell you enough, right at face value, Disinformation Corporation, which uses a satanic, which they use a satanic logo for the company's icon. If that doesn't tell you enough, still, but
Yeah, I actually like to go through and get myself into a debate with these people in, like, say, a Facebook group devoted just to people worshiping Graham Hancock, and I'll test my trivium skills and my research skills to see if I can convince at least one or two people, that whatever Graham Hancock's topic of discussion is completely, debunked. And, I don't know. I would really encourage a lot more people to read more Flamenco, because Flamenco goes into diatribes of information that completely and utterly destroy pretty much all the narratives. Like that Graham Hancock, for instance, talks about the pyramids, the Sphinx, the being a certain age, being super old, or the term ancient, whatnot. You start to really see through all these new age popular book writers on all these subjects of our past. And I think flamenco is a very good starting point. And I'd love to talk a lot more about flamenco.
He was supposed to come on the show last year, and then I don't know, I lost contact with him. So somebody was asking about cannabis. I've read this quote many times on the show. I just wanted to show this as well, and I just showed some of flamenco's books on the show. And for those of you who don't know, you can get to the database by going to the brain link at the top of the Logos Media website. I'll just show that here really quickly as well. If you click on this, if you click on where it says brain right here, it'll take you to a page, and it'll display the brain right there. Or you can use the online version. This week I'll be putting the database for download again for paying members of, I think, 50 or more, I forget, and or 60 or more, and then I'll have it available for pay download. I can't afford to keep doing keep doing all of this research and just put the database and everything out for free all the time. But so this is a really important quote by Louis Jolyon West, who is another doctor and for the CIA and worked with Aldous Huxley, etc. The role of drugs in the exercise of political control is also coming under increased discussion. Control can be through prohibition or supply. The total or even partial prohibition of drugs gives the government considerable leverage for other types of control. An example would be the selective application of drug laws permitting immediate search or no-knock entry against selected components of the population, such as members of certain minority groups or political organizations. But a government can also supply drugs to help control a population. This method, foreseen by Aldous Huxley, Brave New World, 1932, has the governing element employing drugs selectively to manipulate the governed in various ways. To a large extent, the numerous rural and urban communes, which provide a great freedom for private drug use, where hallucinogens are widely used today, are actually subsidized by our society. Their perpetuation is aided by parental or family remittances, welfare and unemployment payments, and benign neglect by the police. In fact, it may be more convenient and perhaps even more economical to keep growing numbers of chronic drug users, especially of hallucinogens, fairly isolated and out of the labor market with its millions of unemployed. To society, the communards, which is another word for communism, that's the precursor to communism, with their hallucinogenic drugs, are probably less bothersome and less expensive than if they are living apart, than if they are engaging in alternative modes of expressing their alienation, such as active, organized, vigorous political protest and dissent. Meanwhile, the communards themselves use drugs like cannabis to foster stability in a setting of relative non-governance. When tensions or hostilities arise, marijuana or hashish is quickly produced and passed around, and the anger quickly goes up in smoke. So, you can see how the promotion of cannabis out there today goes directly towards this as well, because, they don't want people getting angry about all of the crap going on in the world. They want you to smoke a joint and, forget about it and go about your day and, and that's it. So, it's, that's right from Louis Jolyon West, who killed Tusco, the world's largest elephant, with a massive dose of LSD, and the elephant fell over dead instantly. So
I actually could vouch for that, what you just read. Out here in Colorado, I'm a Colorado native, and I've kind of seen the wave of the medical marijuana and, previous what it was like before and after. And I'll tell you, a lot of it really seems to be mainly affecting people's political views. We're swinging really hard to the left, and we're attracting a lot of people on the left, say from other places like Oregon and California and places to move
and to
here.
Promote gun control as well.
And that's what I was just about to bring up is we're seeing a lot of and it makes you just peace, man. Like, chill. We don't need guns. We don't need this. It does make people pacifists, and there may be a time and place for that. But as a whole, on
Very
the
dangerous
community that we have right now,
I'm not sure if I agree with all that.
I have seen a very negative connotation as far as a direct impact in people's political views in a very dangerous way. I don't know
I agree with you. Whenever I've smoked cannabis, I've become more liberal, and whenever I've quit, I've become more conservative. What
Yeah.
did you have to say on that, Stephen? You say you disagree.
Well, to a degree, I do agree. When it was first starting to be introduced, it was used to calm people down and make them less aggressive. However, I've used cannabis products for years now, and I'm still on the same fence. There's no reason to get rid of guns. I think every person has the liberty to be able to accrue the materials to be able to defend themselves however they see fit. Whether that means if you feel like you need to have a cannon in your house or some sort of death ray gun, I don't think cannabis has ever influenced me into thinking that there aren't reasons behind having weapons or some sort of violence.
I would agree with you to a certain extent, to the point that I was in the cannabis industry for quite a long time, and I would say that you are a rarity, as well as I agree with you. So
I was gonna add
you and
that.
I are the minorities
Right.
the
Yeah.
general effect.
When I was in the cannabis movement, they would constantly push the anti-gun rhetoric, and I was like, wait a second, I got a couple of guns, and I grew up around a lot of guns, and I always knew that, wait, there's something not correct with this argument, and so I never bought into going and giving up my ability to defend myself. That just never made any sense to me. Wait, we should rely on the state and the government to come and defend us, or you mean to clean up the mess after the fact?
The guys that are preventing us from having the drugs to begin with.
And one of the things that gave it away right away for me, as far as that agenda goes, is right off the bat, as soon as they legalized here in Colorado, they immediately put a bill in for medical card holders, because that's how it used to be before complete legalization. Medical card holders were not allowed to own guns. It was a felony, even if you didn't have a felony. Just if you had medical patients, you were not allowed to own a gun. You couldn't pass a background check. It's like, okay, well, it's right out there in your face. They're promoting cannabis use. Why? You have to ask yourself, why do you think they're allowing it? If there would be much more pushback, A, and B, you wouldn't see so much funding from people like George Soros, etc. I mean, don't get me started on this. I wrote
also, I'll quick just interject that it's cannabis they're promoting, not hemp. Hemp is
and let's let's remember. Well, they both are, but let's remember.
They both are, but not for different reasons.
Let's remember that it's the extracts and the tinctures and the waxes and all that stuff that are the real suggestions. Concentrating this stuff, where before people just used flour, and now in the last 5 years, everybody is using these concentrates.
Yeah. Look at the last 30 years from where it's come from. The Cannabis Cup winners from the 70s look like the Reggies from today.
Yeah. So, but it's gotten stronger and stronger, and the situation has gotten worse. I've seen people pass out for 24 hours or more from taking one hit off of that wax stuff.
Yeah. Well, and being in the industry for a little while, I can tell you that the thing that the users always fall back on, they defend it with, well, it's medical uses, this and that. It's like, yeah, well, that's the reason why I got into it, was for some of the anti-inflammatory stuff, and I was doing research and all of that. I will tell you that nobody in the industry these days, at least out here, is really interested in that. It's a money-making thing. Everybody's really getting rich off of it, and It's like you just said, it isn't about as much of it's hard to try to find these CBD strains for these medical patients. They exist, but most people are interested in the high potency waxes, and they're getting high, and it's way more about that side of the industry than it is about the medical side.
And what about focusing on non-inflammatory foods to get rid of inflammation? I mean, so you go into these cannabis stores, and being here in California, see, I was the Inland Empire coordinator for the California Hemp Initiative, and I worked on Prop 215. So, I was friends with Jack Hare for 18 years. I interviewed him on the show way, way back before his heart attack and ultimate death and stroke and all of that. But, so looking at it from that perspective, the whole thing has gone in a direction that I never thought I would see it go, and we were initially working to legalize hemp, and which is, of course, cannabis also. But, you know, it's, I don't know. You had said something that I wanted to make a point to, and now I've forgotten what it was. But yeah, you know, it's like the whole thing has gone in a direction about the drugs, and it's just ever stronger, ever more potent. And somebody just commented in the chat, and again, this comes up just like with psychedelics. You know, they didn't become more communist, but as you know, as soon as they got into the cannabis arena, they were surrounded by communists.
Yeah, totally.
You know, so
there's no question it makes you more of a pacifist, and that's what you need to take guns away, and that's the next step to communism.
I know what I was going to say. Sorry, really quickly. When you go into these cannabis stores and they sell these edibles, they're always made with sugary, wheat-based inflammatory foods.
That's for sure.
You know, cookies and brownies and all the stuff that cause the very diseases that they're supposedly trying to cure with cannabis. But if they just changed their diet,
yes, sir,
and lived in truth, they wouldn't need the cannabis to get rid of the inflammation from the crappy foods they eat.
Dude, and that's the whole industry summed up right there. I walked out of the industry because I had a conversation with the owner of one of the dispensaries that I was working in the grow, and I was telling him, look, you know, I'm not putting all these chemicals in the they wanted me to grow with all these water soluble what do you call them? They're synthetics. They're not organic. I'm making compost tea. I'm making it for people who have injuries, for people who have health problems. And the guys are telling me, well, we need to compete. So it's all about price. So we're going to use this cheap crap and I'm like, well, you realize you can't call it for medical use if you're growing all this stuff with stuff that causes medical conditions. You know, like, this is ridiculous. And it ended with me finding out that almost all the vape pens people are all smoking out of, you know, they're all claiming that they smoke so that they can get rid of a medical condition, like maybe they have liver issues, maybe they have you know, Alzheimer's, maybe whatever they have. Meanwhile, the cutting agent that they're putting into the vape pens is Serline, for one, and there's a host of others, and they're all.
What is Serline?
Serline is a cutting agent known to cause liver damage and to cause nerve damage. So it's like you're putting all these cutting agents. It's like, instead of glycerin or alcohol or whatever. I mean, if you just look into, like, every dispensary that you walk into gives you a wide profile of all these different things you can get, but they do not list the harsh ingredients that they're spraying on all the plants.
I got another one for you. So years ago, I used to have one of those volcano vaporizers.
Yeah.
And, you know,
Those are the best.
Well, here's the thing is, so you use one of those for a while, you'll get a chronic cough that doesn't go away. And the only way to get rid of the cough, and both myself and my ex-girlfriend would get this wicked chronic cough from this thing. And so the issue is that the temperature is not high enough to destroy all the microbial contaminants in the flower. Like when you burn it, it destroys any, you know.
Well, there's a difference between combusting and vaporizing.
Well, right, but the vaporizer allows a lot of those contaminants through, okay?
Yep.
And so because of that, people who are sick and think that they're being healthier for vaporizing are actually getting those contaminants. So I started doing research online about this 5-6 years ago. There was only one or two other people that would talk about it, and every single person that I found who brought it up, they would be dismissed and pushed away. I finally wrote this one guy, and he wrote back and he said, nope, I never found anything. You know, nobody wanted to talk about it. The whole issue was hush-hushed, and I ditched using the vaporizer altogether. But, you know, I found that the only way I could stop the chronic cough from using the stupid vaporizer was to smoke a bowl, and then, you know, being a lung expectorant, the cough would immediately stop within like 30 seconds or a minute.
Yeah.
What was that term you just used? Lung what?
Expectorant.
What's that do?
And someone says, vape, clean weed then. Dude, we were getting the best stuff, man, so chill out.
Well, so many people are, okay, so when you're talking about, you know, smoking and, you know, for all the medical,
and we're talking about Segway, wow.
I
3 hours in now.
just real quick, like, the thing that I would like to get out there after years of you know, being a scientific experiment for myself, and for messing around with all the cannabis in the cannabis industry. The thing that I learned, if you can learn from anything I learned, um, it start with diet first. Don't look to all these other like anti-inflammatories and all these other things as a band-aid. You're putting a band-aid on a gaping wound that probably has a root cause. So look into the root cause, and get into your diet, change your diet. And once you fix all the things in your diet, and if and most likely all of your symptoms go away, then the need for things like cannabis start to kind of go away, and then you use it as a tool every once in a while, maybe for certain purposes, but it doesn't become the fix. And when I say fix, it's something that you kind of turn into a fix, just like a drug. So just be careful of that.
So going on what Caleb's talking about, I did a 6-month acupuncture program to become a licensed acupuncture practitioner. And during my time there, I found out that acupuncture is not common. In fact, it's one of the least recommended therapies for a mental or physical illness. And the most common prescribed treatment for an illness is what Caleb is talking about, is diet and exercise. I think the guy had a chart. He said like 50 to 80% of doctors will say like, look, you need to change your diet. You need to exercise. And on top of that, then they will, if that hasn't done anything, they'll recommend you to go get like massage therapy or physical therapy. And then
chiropractor.
Beyond that, they may offer you some sort of types of like medicines, like herbal remedies or something. And then about 1 to 5% of the time, people will recommend doing acupuncture. And so it was just interesting looking into it, because it's mostly diet and exercise. That's the way that you do it.
And what are the two biggest factors in inflammatory diseases? Wheat and sugar, grains and sugar. And then number 3 would be the deadly nightshade family, which is potatoes, tomatoes, eggplants, peppers, those sorts of things.
Yeah, it's really interesting seeing it all come around full swing.
Yeah, and they've got everybody thinking that meat and eggs and butter are the cause of heart disease. Nope, it's your sugar and your grain consumption. And they've had everybody, corralled into a lie in that for the last 80, 85 years, and believing that they need to eat low-fat this and low-fat that. That's the worst thing you can do.
Wartime rations.
Yeah, so, it's like once you cut the grains and you realize, that brain fog lifts off your brain, and you start looking around and going, hey, wait a second. And then you switch to a high-fat diet and you have more energy, you feel better. I mean, I've been on a ketogenic diet for 5.5 years now. I know Caleb is, but, it's like you work out. Like I can work out like, 15, 20 minutes a week if I just stick to it. And I can stay in pretty good shape just with that in a keto diet, where when I was young and in my 20s and eating all these carbs and grains, I used to work out 5 days a week to get half the results as I do with a 15-minute workout, and I'm 47 now,
Yeah. Oh yeah.
So
yeah, that was a huge breakthrough for me. I know we don't have time to get into.
Yeah, we should probably cut it off here in the next 5 minutes. We're just about to hit the 3-hour mark, guys. This is way beyond anything we really set out to do today. Sorry, go ahead though. What were you going to say, Caleb?
Oh no, I was just about to say, something about keto, about that was just a huge breakthrough for me. And but I saw somebody in the chat talking about that there may be some. They have evidence that there was some very shady figures in the very beginning of the cannabis cups in Amsterdam. I'd like more information on that. If you could hook me up with your sources on that. I have been writing. Yeah, I'm very interested in that. I'm especially learning about the Dutch and all the how the Dutch was a port back, not the Dutch, but that whole area was highly influenced in exactly what you're mentioning in the chat. So I'd be interested in that. So if you could find me on Facebook and private message me, I'd be grateful. Thank you.
Somebody is arguing even a high-fat diet is glycogenic. It's ketogenic, but some fats can turn into. He's saying it's turned into lactate. I'm not sure about that. I just recently came across more research that shows how plants versus animals absorb energy from the sun and process it, and why we should be on a high-fat diet. And I'm going to have to get more research on that, but it'll take the whole ketogenic thing to a whole new level. So I will follow up on that soon and get more research so that we can get someone on one of these days soon to discuss that fact.
Awesome.
But apparently there's yet a whole additional level to the keto diet.
So you mean, so you're talking about when milk fats break down into sugar called, I think that's called galactose, right? Because there's all those different types of sugars. Is that what you're talking about? Complex?
Yeah, maybe. I'm not sure. I'll have to look into it more.
Okay.
So, yeah, we're at we're just about at the 3-hour mark, guys.
Real quick before we end,
Sure.
I've been wondering this the whole entire stream for the last 3 hours ever since I got in here. Is that a real shark behind you?
Yeah, that's we named him Bruce, but yeah, it's bull shark. And it's my roommates. We're actually taking him over to a friend's restaurant. He's got a seafood restaurant. He wants him on the wall, but
Wild.
yeah, my friend is a very avid. I don't know what you would call him. He's very interested in the animal kingdoms, and he's got he's into biology like crazy. But he's got you name it. He's got something stuffed, everything. He's really into animals, and we love him. But
That's
but
awesome.
yeah, that's Bruce. Yep, that's the shark.
Great. Yeah, that was all.
Yeah, it's an odd thing to have on your wall. I know. We have all kinds of animal skeletons, and we're really into nature documentaries. And he can tell you just about everything you'd ever want to know about any animal.
I was just wondering because
encyclopedia.
you're in Colorado, Jan's on the coast there. You'd
Yeah.
think that the shark would be over there hanging on the side of the fridge or something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What's on there? It looks like a knife sharpening stone and Dave Asprey's bulletproof keto diet chart over there.
Nice.
That's hilarious.
Very cool.
So, all right, gentlemen.
I'm still trying to phase nice out of my vocabulary. It's been a difficult run.
What do you say instead most of the time?
I say kindly or something like that.
I'd say interesting.
I usually say like right on or something. I like the word right because of righteousness and stuff like that. So I try to say like right on or something like that.
Right on.
And thanks, David, for the $10 super chat just now. Much appreciated. And what we should all do is probably get donations set up somewhere for everybody, people who want to donate to specific individuals or whatever and support the work or research that you're doing. So, maybe if everybody gets their own PayPal thing set up or whatever in the next week.
I have a PayPal. I just got to get a YouTube channel set up so that I can get everything organized.
Yeah.
Yeah, same. So real quick, what's the topic we want to discuss and we want to announce so people can maybe contribute to for next show?
Do you want to do next week on meekness?
Sure.
And specifically focus on that. And that's such a huge area. I started writing down all of these things that I was trying to accomplish. And then it was like, or I think Mark pointed out, yeah, that's all meekness. And it was like, I looked at it, I was like, oh, yeah, it is. So I think Mark will probably be down for discussing meekness next as well.
Cool.
And
hey, someone just commented on the chat. Get Jacob Duelman back to the shows, please.
Yeah, I haven't heard from Jacob for a while. It would be good to have him back too. I don't know what he's working on, but
Mark and I were talking about him last night. We were wondering what happened.
Janessa says, yes, meekness. Great. So, we'll work on that. And I have a lot of bullet points already put together on that. And I'm sure between all of us, we can put together a really good show. So just try to break down what is meekness.
Great.
Perfect.
All right. So thank you guys. Thanks for the great talk. Thanks for the great audience. And we appreciate everybody, the 90 to 100 plus people that have been in there for our morning. And thanks for sticking it out with us. Geez, it's already noon. I can't believe we've been in here this long, and it was just like supposed to be like a little test run or whatever, an hour or whatever, and it's like 3 hours later and we just can't stop here. So
this happens every time. You get us on a roll, we just don't stop.
Yeah, the issue is we got to stay focused and not do so many segues. We really need that moderator thing going. So when we get into this, the moderator's job or sole purpose during the show, and we'll each rotate who's the monitor each show, but should be to keep the rest of us on topic and not worry about the topic itself,
Yeah, that's a great idea.
So just one more thing to throw out there. All right, gentlemen, folks, thanks for your support. Thanks for checking us out today. Thanks for listening. Thanks, guys, for hanging out for 3 hours of your morning. I'm sure you both have things to do, as do I.
No worries, man. My pleasure.
All right. Take care, guys. And we are